The Lord of the Rings is fundamentally a story about project management.
Welcome to the Rings of Power podcast, where the Lorehounds, your guides to Tolkien's world of Middle-earth. I'm David.
I'm John.
And I'm Marilyn. This is our coverage for Prime Video's original series, The Lord of the Rings of Power, Season 2, Episode 5.
In this podcast, we're going to start off with our hot takes, and then we've got some errata from Episode 4, and then we're going to get into our detailed scene-by-scene breakdown of the episode.
If you'd like to contact us, send emails to lotr@thelorehounds.com. If you want to join our Discord server or support the community by subscribing with either Supercast or Patreon, you can check out the Linktree link in the show notes below.
And if you're not into recurring subscriptions, you can also find a link to our season pass, where you can pay a flat one-time $10 fee and you get ad-free episodes, our weekly bonus Lorecast episodes where we dig deeper into the Legendarium, and you get access to the one guide to rule them all, our hand-forged visual guide for the season. John, Celebrimbor would like you to redouble your efforts, please. Annatar said that he'd be willing to assist you, but I think you're going to need to work night and day on this project.
I already do, so I don't know what else he wants from me.
Yeah, you got to squeeze out that extra little bit.
Well, hopefully Annatar is not planning to add an extra, hours in a 24-hour day.
He's got some mithril he'd like to weave into the silicon.
I see.
Marilyn, what did you think of Episode 5?
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty impressive, pretty intense. It seems to me that they are demonstrating that this is the age in which the elves learn the meaning of the long defeat.
What do you mean by that?
Well, that's a saying that Galadriel has in The Lord of the Rings, where she says something about, together with Celebrimbor, they have fought the long defeat.
Oh, I don't remember that. Is that when Frodo, when they're in Lothlorien?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that line. So.
Yeah. So it isn't, we aren't actually in battles yet, but I keep thinking about this in terms of the directions that so many things are heading.
All right, then keep your secrets.
That's my new spoiler thing. So if anyone says a spoiler inadvertently in editing, I'm going to put that over. I was inspired by Alicia and her bleeping me on the Acolyte. So now we're going to have Frodo saying, keep your secrets every time someone blurts out a spoiler.
That's the WAFO.
Yep.
Watch and find out. Or read and find out.
Just keep that for everything. All right, then keep your secrets.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
That's good. Let's take it. So I had a thought. I'm wondering if the stranger may actually rally the desert folk who were diseased by the bad wizard, and I think the disease may prove to be leprosy. And then they will follow the stranger in a rebellion against the bad wizard and, by extension, against Sauron.
Oh, this is a new theory you've got cooking.
It's a theory.
Okay.
So I thought I would just share it out for.
Right. Are you putting internet points? Are you putting some bets down?
I'm not quite as confident of it yet.
Okay.
But let's see how I feel after the next.
You've got it in your tinfoil pot on the stove.
There we go.
Cooking that one up.
There we go.
One half ration of internet points to you.
Yeah, the events in this episode are done brilliantly, and they are so unsettling and distressing, and some of them just downright perfidious.
Yeah,
the P word.
Yeah. Vickers and Edwards are just knocking it out of the park and into the next time zone. They are so gifted at what they're doing. It's a marvel to see. There's a lot of beautiful sets, and there's one set in particular I just want to spend hours looking at every single detail, and you gentlemen probably know which one that is, and we'll
Is it maybe on the island of Númenor?
It could be. Just possibly.
We have to talk about that stained glass window when we get to that scene.
Oh, absolutely.
Great. So you enjoyed the episode, I take it.
It's tough for me to say I enjoyed it because so much of it was so painful.
In a good story way.
It was, well, I mean, obviously, if it's that not painful, it's not in a, oh my gosh, how could they possibly do that sort of
a terrible
cringy
production.
Pain. Not a cringy pain, but a pain that says, you're hitting all the notes and all of them.
Poignant.
That's the word, poignant. Very poignant.
Cool.
Of course,
John?
I want to smack a few people too, but that's something else.
John, what did you think of this episode?
It's interesting. The first time I watched it, I thought we were on a little bit of a slowdown. We were doing more setup, and I didn't like it as much as episode 4. I think I watched it right after my second watch of episode 4. So maybe it was just that I was so high on Tom Bombadil, on the pipeweed of Tom Bombadil, that I wasn't ready to go back to the seriousness of Númenor and Eregion right away, and Khazad-dûm for that matter. But my second watch, I liked it a lot better, and I thought it really does pull a lot together in ways that were not before. I really love the way that we're seeing the dwarven ring effects start to appear. That's much more. That's really interesting to me because we've not seen that portrayed on screen before, right? Everything's rumor by the time of Third Age.
Yeah.
And I still think that they have not adequately addressed Númenorian politics, but I also think the interpersonal parts of Númenor are working for me, and so the plot is working for me. Because the primary thing has to be the interpersonal stuff. I, for one, would like a little more like, well, why do these people, like, what's their philosophy, right? Because right now it feels very simple of like, I don't like the elves. Well, I do like the elves. And that's less interesting to me than like the fear of mortality, which they allude to in this episode, but it's not super explicit, and it's the first time we've heard this worry of Pharazôn, the fear of dying and comparing himself inadequately to the elves. I just think that they could have done a better job setting that up. But like I said, I think that the interpersonal parts are working. They are making me love to hate both Kemen and Eärien.
Yeah. Seriously, they're made for each other, aren't they?
But also, I think what's really good is that Pharazôn is kind of a charmer. Like, I don't have the same vitriol for him as I do for the others, which is funny because he's the one pulling the strings. But he's just more interpersonally charming, and I think that is something we have an issue with in the real world, right? Is we look at charisma and we think charisma equals good intentions, but in reality, it could mean bad intentions too. It's we look more at the way somebody communicates interpersonally than the impact of their actions and words.
Well, I think it's also difficult to remember way back to the first season when we were told that, Muriel's father was essentially deposed because of his desire to go back to the old ways. So that is a subtext that is supporting all of this, but they're not really highlighting that so much. We kind of have to do a lot of memory work on our own, maybe.
The feedback, I'm going a little too deep, but the feedback that we got that Númenorian culture reminded one of the listeners about Judaism.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but there's a king of ancient Judah who says, hey, we should go back to the old ways. And he finds an ancient script that has the whole Torah on it. And he's like, all right, let's implement all this stuff. And I think basically the point is the society was not having it. And it was just too late to save the kingdom.
I want to say that was Josiah, but
I think that's right.
Okay, well, listeners, write in if you want.
That was the name in my head, but I didn't want to say it wrong.
Okay.
So I think you're right. Thank you for the confirmation. And that's so interesting to me that he's pulling from biblical myth too.
Oh yeah, it's all over the place, isn't it?
Yeah. David, your hot takes?
Hands down, my favorite episode of the season so far.
Whoa!
Head and shoulders above the rest.
Wow.
It just feels like everything's coming together. The stakes, like I'm really starting to feel the tension and the drama, and the stakes have been set and things are starting to happen now. All of the production elements, the acting, the scripts, the sets, the camera, it's all working. It all feels like the music is, the conductor is got the band in line and everybody's playing, the right notes at the right time, sort of thing. There are a few lines of dialogue in this episode that are absolute fire, and I've made a note of a couple of them. Again, the way they're using the camera. There were a couple of small points that were like, I was like, I don't know about this. One of them was the tuning crystal rolling away. And there was something else, but like they're so minor, kind of in the grand scheme of things, that I even forgot what the other one was that I was thinking. And so, yeah, I was just really satisfied. And I felt like, okay, we're finally, stuff's happening, and it's happening in a great way. And I enjoyed the heck out of it. I was on my seat the entire episode. Something that I've noticed, and just listening a little bit here and reading a little bit there, not too much, but it seems like, the show is, it's not seems like the show, but the show is walking a fine line of balancing their individual creations, the books and all the written material, and then the movies. And no matter, like if they're overbalanced in one way or the other, you're going to hear a lot of flack coming from one particular sector, right? The movie people are, my God, I can't believe it. The book people are, and then the just the regular TV fans, But if you're catching about an equal amount of flack from all sides, then you're right in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
And it feels like they're pretty well balanced, and that's a hard thing to do. And you're dealing with an estate and a fandom that is going to let you know when you screw it up. And so, people may be gnashing their teeth a little bit and throwing some, comments here and there. But by and large, I think so far, fingers crossed, we're only episode, we got 3 more to go. They're walking the line kind of where they need to be. They could be a little balanced one way or the other, but I really think they're threading their way through this. And for me, this episode really is a demonstration of that, because it feels like they're confident in their storytelling. The actors are starting to grow into their roles. Sometimes for an actor, it's not until season 2, midway season 2, that you're actually starting to go, oh, I got this character now. I'm really being able to embody it. And so Durin, Annatar, Galadriel, Adar's new, so, we got to see what's going on. Adar, like all of these characters, you really feel that the actors have have come to grips with who these characters are. And Durin the Third in this episode is just fire. He's just so good. And Annatar and watching Charlie Vickers in a couple of scenes where he's thinking it through, and then he kind of comes up with a plan, and then you see his head nod and, from one direction to the other, and you're like, oh, here it comes. And so, yeah, I'm just really enjoying, I enjoyed the hell out of this episode, and it's making me feel very good about the season overall.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, David. And I think the way I'm experiencing it is they are confidently in the saddle and telling their story now.
Right.
That it sometimes, as you say, it veers one way, sometimes it veers another, but I think they're owning it a lot more than they did in the first season. And again, I think post-COVID makes a huge difference because they have so much more freedom now.
And post-strike and
post-strike, all of the stuff we tend to forget. The time they were filming was a really tough time.
There was a little bit of chatter in our Discord. People are sort of like fingernail biting. Gosh, I hope we, because we kind of have a little bit of a debacle in the Star Wars universe where they're, what they greenlight and what they cancel seems to be very capricious. And so people, a little nervous, like, oh, is this going to get a season 3, a season 4? I don't know. I have a weird feeling that Amazon is just like, unless you guys really F this up, you've got 5 seasons. Yeah. Just keep doing what you're doing and don't worry. And I think that also gives showrunners and writers and production crews and actors, it gives people confidence to lean into what they're creating and to pour some of their Froa, what was the spirit?
Fea.
Why don't we say pour some of his malice into
No. I thought that was where I went first, John, too.
But to put some weight into their performances and to their craft and into their writing, and when you feel it's like, fine, you need a little bit constraint, you need to be a little bit concerned, like, okay, you want a little bit of pressure, but unless you have that room to grow and know that you're going to be able to grow and that what you're putting into it is going to actually result in something. And so it really feels like this episode just, to me, feels like they have wind in their sails. They have a course set, and they're sailing their hearts out, and that feels good to me as a TV fan.
And their hearts are even bigger than their feet. Shall we go into the front matter, Dave?
Yes. So real quick, we'll just zip through this. Shout out to all of our season pass subscribers and our regular subscribers. If you've joined during the show, thank you so very much. It's made a real big difference for us, and we're really hopeful that you guys are enjoying the content. Obviously, when we see the subscription notice, it's like, oh, great. People are liking what we're doing. So
we get an email and you go, huh, that's nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we come to our podcast like with a little bit more energy. So thank you. Lorecast. So this week we released a whole episode on Tom Bombadil.
Mm-hmm.
I read some poetry.
I sang.
And you sang, and that's people seem to enjoy it. They haven't unsubscribed. So, and going back, we have a podcast on the Maiar. We have the one on Bombadil, and then we're going to do one on Númenor this week, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we've been talking about some ideas, orcs, maybe Balrogs, nameless things. I'm not sure what else we're going to come across, but we're kind of seeing what the episodes bring. And then we're like, oh, okay, that's a really important thing. So obviously after this episode, we want to get into some Númenorian politics.
And if there's something that you are very curious about and you want us to cover, then write in and suggest a topic. Feel free.
Absolutely. Sure. LOTR@thelorehounds.com. John, how's the show guide going?
It's great. You know, I had to correct the spelling of Suzat now that we know that it's a real word. And I think we're going to talk about that in a minute, but things are going swimmingly. You know, I've got the recap ready to post when the embargo lifts, and not too many new characters this time, so I don't have to rush and add a bunch of new characters all of a sudden on Thursday, which is
nice. That always helps.
So, and if you don't know what the show guide is, we use a platform called Notion. So we have there's like a database of on-screen characters. There's a location guide. There's an artifact guide. There's the weekly episode recaps, which we use for our recaps. So that's all included in the season pass. Or if you're a regular monthly, yearly subscriber, that's also part of your benefits. So definitely, if you're interested in that, it's a great resource, especially as a second screen when you're watching the episode. We are fortunate enough to have access to screeners. Thank you, Amazon. Thank you. Especially thank you to the IT folks, because a couple of weeks ago you had a little problem, Marilyn, and they were on the spot.
Holy cow. They were fabulous. They, back and forth, real time in chat sort of mode. And finally they gave me a phone number and I called somebody and we talked about it. And now I have a magic password that I just type in and boof, there it is. I mean,
that's great.
It's beautiful. So yes. Once I finally found the right person,
right,
which is always important.
It is.
But yeah, you find the right person, and wow, they are really, really good.
So
thanks, Bezos.
So with the spoilers, the screeners, we don't have the titles, nor do we have the subtitles. So we're at a slight disadvantage, but that means that we get the episodes right out for you. So as soon as the episode as soon as they lift the embargo on us being allowed to share details about the episodes, which is 9:00 on Thursdays Eastern time, John.
Yep.
And if we have watched ahead of the episodes, we will be very careful to try to not spoil on the episode, right? So if some people on this podcast have
I didn't do it this week. I was very good this week. I did not watch ahead. And it definitely wasn't because I had no time to do that.
No, I knew I couldn't. I knew that really wasn't a very good idea to do. So I did not do it.
All right. Basic coverage plans. If you have any other questions, go back to our episode 1 for season 2. We talk about that. We talk about our backgrounds. Marilyn's an academic. She's taught and studied Tolkien. John is a super fan, read tons. I'm a casual Tolkien fan, but a avid TV watcher. Feedback, LOTR@thelorehounds.com. You can send voicemails. You can use the voice memo app on your phone and then record yourself and send it there. Or you can go to our website. There's a contact form there and a voicemail tool embedded in the website. So you just click record and it uses your system settings. Nancy M., our hand of the pod, what did we call, what was the Lore Master title that you guys called?
Pangaloth.
A Pangaloth? Yes.
Although she could also be a raven. I think that's something that GRM stole from Tolkien, but In The Hobbit, they use ravens for messengers.
Well, we called her. She was hand of the pod for House of the Dragon.
I think that's fine. She can be hand of the pod.
She's collecting all of our feedback and putting it into a Google Doc for us every week. And sometimes she will get in touch with folks who send in feedback just to let you know that she got it, or if she has any questions or clarifications. And we're relying less on Discord for feedback for this season. We relied for it a little bit more on House of the Dragon. So really, the email address is the best way, or the contact form on the website is really the best way to get stuff.
And we had our second voicemail already. So
yes, exciting. All right, we have some errata. Yes. Marilyn, over to you.
Yes, we need to do a correction. It turns out that Suza is the actual quote unquote restaurant word for, wait for it, Shire.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had recognized, as I thought about it, it sounded familiar. I realized that what confused me was that they put the T on the end, which is the definite article. So Suza is Shire, Suzat is the Shire.
It's Suza-T, right? That's how you spell it?
I'm not sure that it includes a dash, John.
Oh, that's what I saw online.
Maybe somewhere, yeah. Maybe somewhere they do it that way, just to make it clear that this is. So if you actually say the Suzat, then you're saying the Shire, which, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
So the also, Western language, this is part
I just want to say,
go ahead.
Why do we have Western in Rune at this point?
Well, it's the common tongue. I mean, it's a common speech wherever you were. And since the hobbits were all wandering, and I
thought it came from Adonaic, though.
It does. But remember, hobbits are connected with humans. Okay. And the Stores initially were not in Rune. They were, they wandered there from the same rough location that the Harfoots are in now. This is all due to Tolkien's frame narrative concept that he is translating a
Can I pause you there and can you define frame narrative?
Right. His frame narrative is that he is translating a manuscript that he found that was written in this language called Western or Common Speech.
But he made it up. He made it all up.
He made it all up, including the languages that it's being translated from. The Western language is primarily based upon Adonaic words, and it became the Common Speech by and large because it was the speech of Númenor. And after certain events, Númenorians were more prevalent in this region. But if you look in the Tolkien Gateway, you'll see the following. Tolkien gave us very few actual Westron words, but it happens that the word for hobbit is one of those he did provide. In Westron, the word for hobbit was kuduk. The older word, which Tolkien translates as hoblita, was kudukan, which we are told meant whole dweller. And the Westron plural ending was probably in, so if kuduk is hobbit, then kudukin means hobbits. So he translated some of the words into what we would recognize as English, but not all of them. So if he was going to use the actual Westron word for hobbits, then he should also use all the other Westron words. Tolkien does give us the Shire is Suza, Rivendell is Carningal, and Samwise Gamgee is actually Banazir Galbazi, or Ban for short.
Okay.
The problem, of course, is that the vast majority of names in Tolkien's Legendarium are never translated into quote-unquote actual Westron. So it would be inconsistent to use the half dozen or more terms that he does give us. So this is actually fairly typical of manuscript translation anyway. This is Tolkien, the scholar, bringing his scholarly experience into this world that he is creating. And as I said before, I had a vague notion that I had seen the word somewhere before, and I wish I had followed up on it right away, but some of you did and told us, and thank you very much for that. And so I dug in and found that little bit more to confirm.
We now know. We all know. No, it's good though. I did not know that word. I did not know that was a word for Shire. So thank you everyone for bringing that to our attention. You want to talk about the Barrow Downs quick?
Yes. Another correction to make. The Barrow Downs were actually built in the First Age. They were made by the ancestors of the Edain during part of their long migration from the east to the west. And again, Tolkien Gateway tells us in the late First Age, the ancestors of the Edain built many of the barrows in the Barrow Downs before they migrated west to Beleriand. In the Second Age, many men that were descended from the ancestors of the Edain, so the time of the Rings of Power series, primarily from the folk of Beor and partly from the folk of Hador, living near Lake Evendim in the northern downs, in the Weather Hills, and in the land in between. So Beor and Hador are two of the three founders of the three friendly houses of men, if you want to put it that way, in the Silmarillion. It is not known if these humans had lived as far south as the Barrow Downs at that time, i.e. the Second Age. During the Dark Years, men who were related to the Dunlendings, which are folk roughly between Gondor and the southern edges of Eriador, had migrated from the valleys of the White Mountains to the empty lands as far north as the Barrow Downs. So there are lots of humans wandering around here. Now, some people quibble with or quarrel with the fact of, yes, sure, there may have been barrows, there may have been bodies, but this animation of spirits of the dead bodies, we know that the Witch King did it in the Third Age, and so there is no Witch King yet. Well, to my mind, Sauron did it in the Second Age. I mean, this is something that the show seems to be giving us, with that marvelous visual image of the explosion of the volcano and the tendrils of dark creeping northwards. I mean, yes, they gave us a very visceral physical reaction to that in the damage to Khazad-dûm in an earlier episode. But I think they're also telling us these tendrils are not just earthquake vibrations. They are Sauron's power reaching out to all kinds of nasty beasties all over the place.
Right. And when you see the nameless thing, the mud skipper thing in the previous episode. And
we'll see something in this episode tonight, too, when we get to it, which I also think similarly had been awakened by Sauron's calling. So I have no problems with the idea that he, in this process, woke up the actual spirits of the dead men who were buried in these tombs, because the showrunners have said something about, in our show, the Barrow-wights are inhabited by the original spirits who were unwilling to be doing what they were doing. So you could have these as being first age leaders who are suddenly being forced into this horrible behavior.
Without, since I'm not as steeped in the lore, and I don't know much about how the Witch King did the Witchy King things and all that, my headcanon, based on what they gave us on the television show and the lines of dialogue, was, and then the movement of Sauron and all that kind of stuff was, he blew up the bridge and then went and maybe, what was the most simple logical path if somebody had to, backtrack around? He just woke up those barrows, just enchanted those dead bodies, and not the whole thing and not all the Witch King stuff. But he is setting a trap, specifically for messengers coming from Lindon and anyone else trying to get to Eregion. So to me, it's totally fine in from a show creation. It works. It doesn't break anything.
And at this point, of course, we can't have a Witch King until we have the Nine Rings.
There you go.
So
yeah, cool. All right, great. Yeah, it's sometimes it's hard to, it's a moving target, trying to track these shows and pick up all the details and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of too where we rely on listeners. So, if you've got lore that you want to make sure we're updated on, or observations that, we might not have made, send them in. It's totally helpful.
So who's going to talk about the closing music?
I haven't really listened to the music much more. John, did you? We talked about it in our feedback a little bit.
You know what? I'm going to send people there. I'm going to say we liked the music, those of us who listened. And
this is the Rufus Wainwright song, Old Tom Bombadil, at the end of episode 4.
But we did talk several minutes about Rufus Wainwright and the song. So check out the feedback episode if you want to hear more conversation on that.
Right. Here, John correct himself.
I had a gaffe. I had to correct myself real quick.
Epic.
Yeah. Wikipedia saved my butt.
It's good at that sort of thing, isn't it?
Cool. I think we're all wrapped up with our errata and other front matter, so we are ready for a scene-by-scene breakdown.
All right. Well, before that, we're going to take a quick break. And we're back. All right, so scene by scene breakdown. We start off with a new sun shaft. Durin the Third wears one of 7 rings forged by Celebrimbor and Sauron. Narvi and Durin 4 have trouble finding a new sunlight shaft, so Durin 3 tells them to dig into a support shaft. When they refuse, the king digs it himself, allowing light into Khazad-dûm. The king warns his son to listen to him next time, and the kingdom celebrates.
So this opening shot of the mountains and the sort of flowing, it's very Jacksonian. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we've talked a lot about the visual style that they're taking from the show. And again, it was just one of those ones that really struck me, which to me, it's fine. I think because it's providing a visual continuity across what we have in terms of movies and television shows.
Yeah, and they also had the distinguishing features of the large statues above and the openings of the shafts,
mm-hmm.
you know, which we saw in earlier episodes, which were a wonderful explanation for how they brought the light down in. So,
and then we get this crossfading of the stone mountain into the ring.
Yeah, and
then Durin's hand reaching to get the ring. And the interesting thing about that crossfade that just dissolve from one shot to the other, that's the easy part. The part of having Durin's hand reach out to that ring and pick it up, that's actually a lot more technically challenging than you would think it would be.
Oh.
And it is flawless. It is spot on. And I was just really impressed with the craft and the care that they took with this whole setup shot. And we do this a couple of other times. There's a great shot with Disa and Durin later. The way that Durin the Third's hand reaches to that ring also really calls back to the scene on the mountainside of the Jackson movie with Boromir and the ring falling into the snow.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just really smart visual setups and using the language that we already have established and then doing their own thing with it. So super impressive.
Yeah, I found myself wondering if the blue ring was specifically calling to him in particular.
Mm-hmm. Of the
7, mm-hmm. Why that one?
Right.
And that just the strong emphasis on it visually seemed to emphasize the possibility that, this one's for you, Durin the Third.
Well, why do the rings speak parcel tongue?
What?
I said, why do the rings speak parcel tongue from Harry Potter?
Is that what that is?
Are they doing, when the snakes talk?
So they're doing 7 Horcruxes? Is that what you're saying?
I guess so. All right. Well, listen, we could talk all day about how the Horcruxes are like a direct lift from the ring from Lord of the Rings, but
yes and no. I have a bone to pick with that idea.
All right.
That's not this series. So
yeah, I don't know if we're going to be doing a Harry Potter series anytime soon.
Yeah,
no,
but
thank you.
Anyway, yeah, maybe we'll talk about Horcruxes one day. As that would be a fun podcast. Is like we compare the different like infused objects from different series and like how they compare. Anyway, all right.
Yeah, I found the notion that King Durin was going to douse the mountain with this ring that had just come to him. I mean, hubris much? He seems to have a lot more energy, but the notion that he has this confidence to dig into a foundational wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's got a little roid rage. He feels stronger, and he's like, give me the pick.
Yes, he definitely seems to me to be more energetic.
Yeah.
And digging into a foundation, I mean, the metaphor for that, you're weakening that which is supposed to protect you from enemy forces, and you're making yourself vulnerable. So, I mean, you could argue, all right, but without the sunlight, they'll run out of food in 3 months. So,
right.
Yeah.
Project management,
bad choice.
Pros and cons. The Lord of the Rings is fundamentally a story about project management.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Right, yeah, because he's on a giant timeline. He's got milestones to meet. Frodo. I'm thinking of Frodo getting across.
What's that sound I'm hearing all the way from Oxford. It's the sound of something underground rolling over and over and over. Flip, 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 flip.
Oh boy. I do like that Durin gets like completely Durin the fourth, sorry, Durin the Younger, I'll say. Durin the Younger gets completely out of his mind immediately, right? He's like, "Don't do it! Don't do it!" He's just shouting at his dad. He doesn't go like, "Hey, maybe that's not the best idea." He just goes from 0 to 10 very quickly. And
yeah, well, because dwarf, come on.
Yeah, but I wonder if
because son of Durin.
I wonder if it lessens the impact of the statement, though. The fact that he doesn't approach it with some kind of like, "Hey, I'm a little concerned about this." But at the same time, he's running towards him with an axe. I guess maybe I would panic too.
He's starting to see his father suddenly being more energetic than he has been, because we see later a scene where he has the ring off. He's a little bit confused and less energetic, right? And that his father would suddenly want to start digging, who has been up to this point cautious about their digging and where they dig and how much they dig, because we also get that line later, like, who set these these regulations?
Right.
Oh, you did. Oh,
You
well.
did.
So I think Durin the fourth is, I would say he's a little bit alarmed because his father's acting pretty weird.
More than a little.
Yeah.
Right. And kingdoms do thrive on some kind of stability.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of why monarchies prevail, is that people just want some kind of predictability to their lives, right?
Yeah.
And so when you get a mad king in the Game of Thrones universe, and when you get a king who perhaps is taxing at 100% in this universe, I think people are going to start to go, I don't know about this.
Yeah. A little strange. I do have to say, though, Peter Mullen as Durin the Third is
brilliant.
Oh man, he hasn't caught my eye up until this point, but this episode I'm just so impressed with what he's finally doing here. And I love the line of "Give me your axe," which is a great contrast to a line of "And you have my axe," right?
Right.
So,
it's demanding rather than offering.
Yeah, point counterpoint there. Yeah. So.
Wasn't he in Westworld too?
Yes, he was.
That was a great role too, when he had to play like robot version of him.
Yep. Like a super crazy robot. Anyway, let's not.
I'd recommend
spoilers
people
for
watch
a canceled show.
I'd recommend you watch it, but you can't watch it anymore. So I don't think spoilers matter anymore.
Right.
They ripped it from HBO. It's not. You can't even stream it anymore.
It's annoying when they do that stuff.
Yeah.
Seriously.
The last thing for me on this scene, though, is the contrasting light on Durin the Fourth's face when the light is the sunlight is getting on him and everything else is in shadow, but that daylight, that bright blue daylight, is just perfectly. There's a lot of problems with the darkness and visibility this season. So overall, I've heard other people complaining about it too, even on the broadcast ones. It's not just our screeners.
Yeah.
But that was such a clear shot, and that daylight just felt so refreshing and strong and healthy, and it was just beautifully visually well done on this whole scene.
Yeah, he has a speech later on about being chained to the sun, but I don't know if you want me to save that.
We'll get there. We'll get there. I think
we'll get there.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't we go to Annatar? I almost call this Annatar's a lover spurned phase because he was just really cold and nasty, right? He was just really like, I don't want to even talk to you, Celebrimbor. Narvi and Celebrimbor unveiled the doors of Durin, inscribed using a Thildin and unbreachable without a password, only known to friends, might I add. Sauron acts coldly toward Celebrimbor in an attempt to manipulate him into forging rings for men. Sauron says he fears Númenor and hopes rings will help. He uses Eärendil, Tuor, and Beren as examples of men who were worthy of rings, but Celebrimbor gets scared by Annatar's new idea of 9 rings. Annatar says he will make the 9 rings himself.
Yeah.
So, the doors of Durin.
Yes, that was a lovely moment.
Do you guys feel like they handled this right?
Could have had a little bit more zhuzh. It felt like it came and went real quick.
Yeah, it did. That's true. Agreed.
Yeah, it's almost as though they recognize we can't not do this.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be screaming at us in the streets.
Oh, fine, we'll do the Doors of Durin.
Right,
We'll move on.
Let's do this and then get back to our plot lines.
It was a begrudging plot line.
I kind of been expecting it or looking for it. Like, okay, when is it going to happen? How is it going to get triggered? All this stuff, and then it was there. I was like, oh, cool! I was pretty excited by it. So
yeah, as soon as Celebrimbor made a Thildin, I was like, oh, okay, I think we're going to get it this season.
Yes, that was my feeling also. I still would love to see them actually hung in place before,
right,
all hell breaks loose, which it's coming closer and closer.
Right. I think maybe because it was in the middle of kind of a tense plot line, it took away from a little bit of the celebration of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because immediately Annatar's opposition to it kind of put a damper on everything.
Annatar stomps his foot and goes to the other room.
So
he gets his pouty face on.
I think that's a really interesting place for a conversation too, because was Annatar being unhappy as a ruse to pull Celebrimbor in, or is it true also that he's worried because he's seeing the alliance, a potential alliance forming and a friendship forming between the dwarves and the elves that he didn't want to have happen? So I was trying to parse out, like, what is his coldness, and is it also true that he was like, how do I get 9 for the humans, because they're the most corruptible, so like I really want to get my claws into them. So I thought it was just there's multiple levels going on there with Annatar's coldness.
David. Yeah, I think it's all the above.
Okay.
I mean, it's just sort of the basic, okay, he's not completely under my control. And in fact, the line that Celebrimbor says, we mustn't allow our reach to exceed our grasp.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point where he's at that point. But I think that's also when he realizes that he's now riding the tiger.
Right.
And, he's never, the wool is never completely pulled over his eyes. Mm-hmm. He knows that there's something odd going on, and he keeps driving forward in his desire to do great things.
Well, and Celebrimbor calls Annatar out for gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he does. Which I find fascinating, because initially, he was kneeling down to this dude, and now it's like, no, you can't do that. But I still don't really know, and I'm not clear on what it is that Celebrimbor has that Annatar doesn't have. He keeps making it sound.
He couldn't figure out how to get the mithril to balance, right? Like, it does seem like in this episode we get the answer of, like, he cannot figure out how to get this balance right by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, it surprises me, because not only is he a Maya, but he's also a very knowledgeable forage person. I mean, he studied with Aule. And so it's odd to me that there could be any knowledge. I mean, it's like when he came in with Celebrimbor back when he was just Halbrand, saying, oh, well, in my country, we use alloys.
Mm-hmm.
And there it was, the knowledge imbalance was completely reversed, because of course Celebrimbor would have heard of alloys by this time in his career. Come on. So it's just odd to me somehow.
Isn't it true, though, that part of what attracted Morgoth to the Silmarils was the fact that he couldn't create those?
That's an interesting idea. That's not one I've heard before.
Remind me, the creator, is it Fëanor? Who's the
Fëanor created him?
Yeah. Grandfather.
Who else created? But just that one dude. He had the talent. Nobody else had the talent to do it. And other people tried to, have probably tried to achieve that greatness.
Okay.
So whatever Celebrimbor has as a natural artist and an artisan and a craftsman of this sort of most disciplined and highest order, just like, a musician. Yeah, I might be able to, play a tune on a fiddle and, have folks kick up a jig, but, to sit first chair at, London or something like that, that's something special. And yeah, I mean, granted, Morgoth was even more powerful than Sauron, but Morgoth couldn't create anything or like the Silmarils. So There's something unique in the creation there.
Yeah, that is a good point. And the other thing that I thought was perhaps it was simply that Annatar wants to be sure that Celebrimbor takes part in the making of the rings in the hopes that he can further corrupt Celebrimbor and maybe even win him over to the side.
So let me posit a theory here. Annatar, Sauron, is following the Dennis system from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Now, this sounds silly, but I've sent you both an image in the chat in Discord.
Okay.
That I'd like you to look at now. Now, the Dennis system, for some background, is a system created by one of the main characters, Dennis. They're all awful people in the show. That's the whole joke of the show. But this guy, he is just constantly trying to manipulate women into sleeping with him. Mm-hmm. And he's just terrible about it. And he says to his friends, he says, look, this system is my foolproof system to make sure that a woman will always crave your attention. And I think that Annatar is doing this to Celebrimbor. So here are the steps. Ready?
It's despicable me right there.
Ready? It's demonstrate value, engage physically, forge rings. Let's say that. Nurture dependence, neglect emotionally. That's where we're at now.
Yeah.
Inspire hope. That's later in the episode. Then separate entirely. Will we get there? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so, because we've seen some some clips in the, of what's coming. Yeah. At the end of this episode, we know what's coming.
Well, and I think Annatar is also spending far too much time with Mirdania.
Yeah.
And that's getting me a little nervous for Mirdania's sake.
Annatar wants to separate Celebrimbor from any allies. He wants to isolate him emotionally so that he's wholly dependent on Annatar. That is why Annatar is following the foolproof Dennis system.
Absolutely. I think you are spot on this one, John.
And he's already starting to play good cop to Celebrimbor's bad cop.
Well plucked.
Came out from Celebrimbor's own worry and fear and guilt over, oh dear, I didn't do it perfectly.
Something that I really love about Charlie Vickers' performance and the writing behind Annatar is just how well he's playing Celebrimbor, right? He never, and how well he plays Mirdania too. Like how well he's playing everybody. He's not ever explicitly saying something. He's leading them to water, right? He's saying later in the episode, he goes, we'll have to tell the High King.
Right.
And then he pauses and he goes, or I guess we could plunge ahead forward. Like as if it's an afterthought, as if he's disappointed to hear that. It's beautifully done. And even in this, I mean, he's pulling on all the heartstrings, right? Arendelle, Tuor, Beren, these are the heroic men of the first days. Although I don't know if I'd use Arendelle as an example of men, because he kind of skews more elf. I think of him more as an elf than a man, even though he's both.
Yep.
But Tuor and Beren, great examples, I actually think Turin would have been a better example, but
I know.
I know he's got moral issues, but all right, you're right. I back out of my comment.
I think you need to post that picture in the Discord or
that would be great.
The guide.
I'll put it in the guide under the Annatar Grows Cold.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think that'll be fun.
I love too this construction of the 3x3x3 sort of thing.
Sure.
Our third forging, we need 9 rings. Bring balance, all this kind of stuff, and so it's the poetry and the rhyming of all of this stuff. And that he's like, well, okay, fine. I'm just going to use your forge. Thanks very much, and your staff. Also, thanks very much.
Seriously.
And make my own rings. So and he just knowing that Celebrimbor will not ultimately be able to stay away.
And he almost says, but this is what you have to do, and then looks at Annatar and stops, right?
right. Yeah.
But the numerology of 9 is referred to in a number of different systems. And I think in some possibly medieval Christianity writings, the same thing that he says, the 3x3 is the further perfection of the numbers. So that's
right.
That's very much in keeping.
And some nice foreshadowing here for Númenor. Númenor's fractured, glory and ruin, and I fear Númenor. So they did a good job from the script standpoint of setting up what's going to come that we're going to see on screen this very episode. So that was very smart strategically of the writers.
It's also very lore-based. It's very lore-based because just like his former master Morgoth, he fears Númenor and he hates it.
Right. It's a true statement, right?
Exactly.
It's true, but not in the way he's portraying it.
Yes, this is what's so incredibly insidious and evil about him.
Exactly. And it's beautiful. We love it.
It's an amazing accomplishment.
Shall we go there?
All right. So Pharazôn and Kemen is the next scene. Pharazôn looks toward Tol Eressëa and laments the mortality of men. Kemen encourages his father to treat the scepter as enough and to reshape Númenor. Pharazôn tells his son that his mother prophesied that Kemen would meet an ill end. He promises to tell his son what she said if he succeeds in his new task.
So this had some lore density involved here.
Kinda.
This tower, Metal Tarma, the doom of man is referred to here. It was kind of packed in a little bit.
I guess you're right. There was more than I gave it credit for.
Yeah,
because I think probably for you, and this isn't a knock. It's just that you're like, oh, of course, obviously, these are all
right. Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh, Metal Tarma. Oh, what's this tower rate? Wait, what was that? What's Eressëa?
You co-hosted a whole podcast about this stuff, David.
It was 2 years ago, my man. We have put out how many podcasts since we did that?
I think we're up to like 345.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that he's reinterpreted the tower in Eressëa as something to taunt humans with the knowledge that they will die.
So good.
When, in point of fact, it was so that all Númenorians at that point could look out to the west, to their friends, the elves. And that from time to time, the elves would sail to Númenor in the western harbor, because that was the closest one, to bring gifts and knowledge and to maintain that connection. And now it's just been flipped entirely on its head.
So good. Right? Yeah. It's so really good. And that's what happens over the course of time, as we're affected by things and we affect things, we lose the meanings of things. So, what does the Statue of Liberty really mean? Or how did it really come? Like now it's just this thing in New York that you go to and you see, oh, there's a Statue of Liberty. Oh, it's smaller than I thought it was going to be, and oh, you can take a boat around to it or whatever. But, this idea of liberty and égalité and, all of these concepts that are so deeply embedded in it, they're just kind of like, huh. And then who knows, one day, it might end up on a beach in a world that's racked, that's no longer ruled by human beings.
Covered in sand.
So I was just wondering too, just for some folks, if we need a little lore check here on this tower and Metal Tarma.
So Metal Tarma is the holy mountain of the Númenorians. It is both a shrine and a mountain, and it is where the king would go 3 times a year, or the queen, because Númenor has historically had both kings and queens. And the ruler of Númenor would go 3 times a year to pay tribute to the Valar, and the eagles would come roost to say, hey, good job, proud dad moment for Manwë. And essentially it's been neglected for some time since the Númenorians started turning against, they call it the elvish ways in the show. It's really the ways of the Valar. That's really the ways of the faithful is what they call it. And we finally get that term in this episode, so I can say it.
Yay!
Yeah, isn't that great? But it is a shrine and a mountain, and it is the highest point in Númenor, I believe.
And what's this tower?
Yes.
Well, I think they're talking about.
They said White Tower.
Yeah. So the tower on Tol Eressëa, that is the Lonely Isle.
Okay, so it's an island separate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it the Lonely Isle? Is that the translation, Marilyn?
Yes, yes, the Lonely Isle. And you can just barely see it from the highest parts of Númenor, which would include the Metal Tarma. So you have these contrasting towers. You have the tower that was built by the elves on Tol Eressëa, and you have the natural tower of Metal Tarma.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, so here's the fun lore bit, is that when the elves went to Valinor, Ulmo, who is the water Vala, he breaks off a piece of Beleriand into an island, and he uses the island as a ferry to get the elves to Valinor.
Oh, I remember this.
And they're happy there, so he just leaves the island parked off the coast of Valinor, and that becomes Tol Eressëa.
Okay.
And Osse was particularly happy, Osse being a Maya who is pledged to Ulmo, but he kind of fell in love with the Teleri and the sea-dwelling elves, and he was very sad when they were going to leave Beleriand, and so this was a nice compromise as well, that, you still have this island, and they can still be an island people, and yet also go to Valinor when they want to see their kin who they've parted from.
Right.
And then we get this concept of the doom of man.
Oh, yeah.
Which you can really see Pharazôn chewing on this. He's like, oh, this really galls me, and I'm gonna use this to wield political power that we don't know where we go when we die.
Mm-hmm. And the original form of it was the gift of Iluvatar to men. Or humans, as I prefer to say. But
right.
It's changed so much over time, and this is another sign of how the Númenóreans have changed and fallen off of the old ways. Encouraged, no doubt, by Morgoth and all of his machinations over time, installing fear of what happens when you die. Whereas initially it was actually a gift that the elves would envy, because it means they can leave the circles of the world, humans. Whereas the elves are bound to the circles of the world, even if they're reduced entirely to their Fea. They still can't go anywhere else. They just have to hang around until the end, and then they don't know what's going to happen.
Right. What is it? Sidereal longevity? What's the
serial longevity?
Yeah, serial longevity.
Like a serial killer, just have fun with it.
But sidereal too, because they love the stars, so that works.
Cool.
There you go.
And I also like this idea that Kemen, even though we know that he is the most despicable of characters so far on this show, but this idea that, what is a very human concept, a very, race of men concept, which is, it is what you make of it. So reach out and mold these things. And so you have the scepter, use it. The age of man is upon us now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but then Pharazôn's manipulation, man, if you think Annatar is bad, Pharazôn, boy, does he pull a really, really bad twist on his son here. This is like evil, evil stuff.
Yeah, I really couldn't understand it, because on the one hand, it looks like all of a sudden Kemen has risen in his father's estimation so much. He's wearing these clothes and he's with his father alone, and he's daring to give his father advice about, let the scepter be enough, and look at all the toys you have to play with now, and, you can have a lot of fun. I suppose he also, in the back of his mind, has the calculus of, and when you're gone, old man, it's my turn. Though, of course, he's smart enough
There's always
to
two.
allude to that.
There's always two.
The master and the apprentice.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think it's really showing us this narcissistic quality that Pharazôn has.
Sure.
And his cunning. That, you're rising up, but you're never, and that whole thing of like, you're never going to be good enough. You're never going to, and so you're always going to come back for more, and you're always going to push it, and you're always going to go to the extra degree. And it's interesting now that I'm saying this too, because that's not dissimilar to what's happening in Kelim Mor's Forge at the end of this, where he's saying, you guys aren't good enough.
Right.
You got to bring it up. And that can be, there are ways in which that can be healthy, and then there's ways that it can be very unhealthy in both physically and psychologically.
Definitely.
Yeah, agreed. So let's go on to the Númenorian prophecies with Elendil, and also I'll direct you to the Discord channel where I have a new image for you.
Okay.
It is a recreation of the Dennis system with Annatar's head on it.
That's a good TikTok, John. You got to put that out.
Yes.
I will. After the embargo, we'll get that one out.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. So Númenorian prophecies. Elendil tries to hype up Miriel, telling her she opened him back up to the old ways of the faithful. When she asks what he saw in the Palantir, he says he saw himself lost, riding from the city to an unknown destination. Muriel says perhaps Númenor's history changed and that Pharazôn should be king to avoid their home's downfall. She commands Elendil to remain calm and to allow events to continue.
So the another great opening scene here where we have this tilted camera sort of from this high up vantage point, which gives us a feeling of unease and things are out of whack. So we come into the scene already feeling ill at ease. And then we have this very discomforting conversation where things are strange and weird and we're not really sure what's going on. And my queen's saying weird things and what am I supposed to do with this stuff? And
This is not unlike the camera angles for the conversation between Galadriel and Annatar in the barn in season 1. And there's a name for that camera angle, and I'm not remembering. I think it starts with a K.
You know, I don't want to talk about real world politics. I do think that there is something to be said about the way that when you are trying to do the right thing, you are usually playing by the rules. And those who are trying to do the wrong thing do not play by the rules. And it's really hard to combat that. And so Muriel is really trying to do the right thing. And she's like, just do your duty and just keep it going. Just maybe this is the right path. She has no ego about it, right? She says, whatever is good for Númenor, I am all for. I want the island to survive. I want my people to survive. It doesn't matter if I have the scepter. And that's a really beautiful moment, and it's a really beautiful contrast to everything else that happens in the episode on the other side, on the Kingsmen side. So we've got two factions now. We've got the faithful and the Kingsmen. And so if you look at the show guide, after the embargo has lifted, I will have sorted the Númenorians in both.
Ooh, I bet that was exciting.
Well, I haven't done it yet, but it will be exciting.
Right. It will be exciting. It will have been exciting.
I've had Manish sub-faction just sitting there with no entries for the entire season. And I've been waiting for this moment.
That's
why. Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
There was a reason I had that field in the whole thing.
I think I messaged you too about that. I was like, wait, why do we have this here?
I'm like, don't do that. Don't just leave that be for a minute.
Now you know.
There's a plan. Yeah.
So it seems when in his vision, in the visioning of his vision, it seemed like the city might be a bit of a smoking ruin, or there seems to be smoke coming off the city
and fire.
Didn't look great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this idea too that Muriel talks about, which is not every battle must be fought to be won. That's one of these one of the lines that really caught me this episode, and it made me sort of think two things. One was that sometimes it's okay for things not to be complete. And then the other one is kind of about spiritual struggles, because she was telling him to be calm in the center of all of this. And the first part of that, which is things that it's okay for things to be not complete, makes me think of that line from Bombadil that Tolkien that you had talked about in the Lorecast, that not all things need to be explained.
Nice.
That sometimes enigma is a good thing. And that is it's something that we as human beings are bad at, kind of at a species level. On an individual level, we can do it, but on a species level, our brains want answers to the patterns. We're meaning-making machines. We're pattern-seeking machines. And when we have enigmas, it drives us crazy, and we want to answer them. That's why we can, send people to the moon and put people in orbit, and all of this kind of stuff. We are bad at some other things, but we're good at some things. And so I love this idea that it's okay that this fight doesn't have to win with a battle, right? It doesn't have to resolve in a particular way. It doesn't have to be quote unquote won.
Just our very ancient formulation is to survive the predators.
Right.
And the pattern making skills that we have are part of that. to be able to recognize patterns and to assign, safety and versus danger to them. And if we can't do one or the other, that becomes the anxiety point. I don't know. Is this good? Is this bad?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of rolls over into an awful lot of our lives, even to this day.
So the other thing that this scene made me think about was this idea of jihad, and not of jihad in a modern political sense that it has come to mean as it's like if we say make a Xerox copy or Kleenex tissue, right? It's a word that becomes associated with something, and that's not what it was. There's another meaning to jihad, which there's the greater jihad and the lesser jihad. Mm-hmm. A lesser jihad is debate, persuasion, sort of the art of politics. And then, of course, there's the jihad of the sword or warfare, and that's when you need to defend yourself and your community. But the greater jihad is that which is involves the struggle of your own passions and your own impulses and your own, and again, just what we were talking about, this anxiety to solve and answer questions. Mm-hmm. And she's telling him in this scene, be still. Yeah. Don't answer the question. Don't pick up the sword. Mm-hmm. Be still at the center of the storm, because it's going to be around you that this thing is going to hold together or fall apart. And so the individual here is standing in place of the larger community. And if we don't all individually hold stillness or peace or tolerance or whatever individually, our society can't do it, right? We can't do it. So it starts with an individual. Sociological change starts with individual change.
Sure.
And so this scene, just like, it's such a blink of an eye scene, but it is so infused with meaning and depth. And the way she puts her hand on his heart and she's asking him, be still.
Yeah.
Don't lash out, because that is the tool of our enemies here. And if we answer in the same way, then we're going to be doomed.
It also is a callback to the previous episode where the woman walks up and slaps her.
Right.
And she hugs her.
Right.
And asks her to, who did you lose? And I'm so sorry, and grieves with her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is where, again, this episode is really firing on some on all cylinders for me here.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say to the FBI agent that's tuned in when we talk about jihad in the second week of September.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
We're fine. We're fine. We're talking about something else.
We're okay down here. How are you? Sorry.
I actually had a student who was the imam for the college.
Oh wow.
Muslim. As a first-year student, he was their imam for the college Muslim organization, and he told me that very thing about, the personal work to overcome your limitations and to strive to. It means striving, to reach as deeply and well as you can. And he took a class with me, and then at the end of the class, I said, "Well, you have shown me more than anything I could ever possibly read the embodiment of that meaning of it. So thank you for being my teacher."
Yeah.
I think that's an important point, and I don't think we should allow bad actors twist beautiful concepts into their own meanings and to let those concepts stick.
And so it's kind of weirdly fitting that we're talking about it this week. So
and this very eve. This very eve.
Yes, indeed. So
yeah.
And I think that's the thing is that the greater struggle of your own internal passions. It's easy to pick up a sword. It's easy to throw a punch. It's easy to throw a harsh word. It's harder to not do that and to seek a different answer that doesn't necessarily involve the denigration or death of somebody else, which we're going to see later in the episode.
I really think now this conversation, they are building Muriel up to be a Christ-like figure, or from whatever other religious path you may follow.
Right.
But
I'm thinking of her as an Obi-Wan Kenobi. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Right.
And I do enjoy that. Do you know about this whole Obi-Wan Kenobi? People who have never seen Star Wars, generally older people who have never seen Star Wars, have pictures of Ewan McGregor in their homes, and they think it's Jesus.
No,
And
really.
so their grandkids come over and they're like, "Do you understand that this is a picture of Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi in the prequels? It's when he has the long hair."
wow.
This is a real thing. Look it up on TikTok or something. They find pictures that look very Christ-like of Ewan McGregor in their grandparents' homes.
Sorry.
I'll take your word for it.
All right.
Let's go on to Captain. Elendil returns to the shipyards to receive a warning from his daughter Aarion. There, Kemen has fired the faithful seamen, including Elendil. When Elendil calmly accepts this, Valandil and the other seamen thank him as their captain. Aarion offers to vouch for Valandil to get his job back, but he refuses the offer. Pharazôn uncovers the Palantir of Númenor.
How dare you reduce my grief to petty ambition? Oh, that was such a good line. I shook my fist at the screen. I was like, yes! That was so good. We don't see much of her, but that line written and delivered and acted was perfect.
It was great, and that scene was just incredibly heartbreaking. This is his
Right?
remaining child.
Right.
Well, he has another one. They've name dropped Anarion.
Oh, right. The other brother.
Yeah.
For all we know, Anarion is just out of his life anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But he doesn't have his children. He doesn't have any of his children with him in his life.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's alone.
Exactly.
He's alone, and he's not even being dentist. And it's really sad because she's really following classic patriarchal scripts, right? Of grief has to turn to anger and vengeance, when really neither of those will help you healthily grieve. Neither of those will bring you any peace. Instead, you should let yourself feel the pain and you should confront your emotions. But it's much easier to feel angry than feel sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most assuredly.
And I would say it even goes back to that question of we don't like unresolved things as human beings. And so when we have a death of a loved one, that we want to resolve the pain. And if it's a death that's caused by someone that we can blame, all the more easy to be angry and upset at that person, as opposed to just hold the pain. And it can't be, some things can't be fixed, and you just have to carry them.
Right.
And we will find someone to blame whether or not it makes any sense.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at the justice
system. If we are
right?
of that particular bent.
Look at the justice system. It is based on a retributive model rather than a restorative model. It is based on the victim rights movement that cropped up specifically not to help victims, but to give harsher punishments to perpetrators.
Yeah.
It is falsely named, but and so I do think that we as a society find it easier to be vindictive, easier to be retributivist than we do to restore. And that's it's a big shame. And I think we see that here in Númenorian culture, which is why this scene rings so true.
Right.
Yes. We have less of an emphasis on communal bonds and much more emphasis on individuality.
Right.
And this is my grief, and how dare you call my grief,
Right.
What about your father's grief? It's not like you're the only person in the world who is grieving right now.
He's lost a wife. You've lost a mother. You both have
and as far as we know, he's lost one son and the other one is estranged. And the fact that he can let loose at his daughter this way, is just indicative of his own frustration and grief coming out and saying, you're going to find you're standing on seawater.
Yeah.
And he's not wrong. I still have a hard time imagining when she became so very powerful. Because it was actually she who said, it's by my authority that this is all happening now. When Elendil walks into the middle of the crowd. And I'm like, say what? I mean, Kemen is standing right at your elbow.
Right.
How can you say it's by your authority?
Yeah,
she's wearing.
That was a little off for me.
Okay.
I hear you.
She's wearing the thing. So yeah, maybe there's just some stuff that was cut or that they didn't get on screen that was a little bit more illustrative of
I really wish we had seen, maybe there will be a director's cut, more of Eärion's development.
Okay.
It just, every time it seems like she's leapt ahead 3 steps and it's jarring to me.
Yeah, she is a little underbaked compared to
I think so.
Valendil or
which is too bad
Kemen
because the actor is fantastic, as you say. The delivery of that line and the argument with her father, pitch perfect.
Yeah.
So give me more.
We had her more in season 1, if I remember right.
A little bit, not much.
A little bit,
Okay.
yeah.
Because once they go to Middle Earth, she's gone, right? She's still in Númenor.
Right.
Yeah, but her significance has increased so much that I really feel like I want a little bit more.
That's fair.
Understanding of her process.
And I think we talked about this. Was it the last episode or on the maybe not on the feedback, but I think on episode 4, where we have Rhûn, we have the Southlands, we have Lindon, we have Eregion and Númenor. Like these are a lot of places that we're dealing with in an 8 episode series season. That's a lot of geography to cover. So
Yep.
You know, I've been rewatching Mrs. Davis with my wife lately because I finally convinced her to watch it. And I'm thinking about an aspect of that show that really applies here. And that's everybody wants a quest. And who do we get them from? Right? You know, Mrs. Davis assigns quests. Another very important figure assigns quests in that show. And I don't want to spoil it for people because everyone should still watch it. It was very good and not enough people watched it. It was my show of the year last year.
Yeah. It was
and we did a fun podcast about it as well. Right. So if that's incentive for you, go for it.
But look at how many people in grief. I know I did this. When I lost my dad, I was constantly looking for like quests. And I say that in, you know, a silly, you know, a very adventurous sounding word, but, you know, purpose, right? You look for purpose. You look for meaning in the loss. You look for a way to make it right when you can't.
Which is exactly what Isildur is doing.
Exactly.
It has been doing.
What Isildur is doing, what Eärien is doing right now, what Elendil is doing, I think, when he tries to go to Miriel and say, this is an injustice, we'll get you your queenship back.
Yes, it's a fair point.
I think it's really interesting the way the show explores grief. And I had a Twitter exchange with someone the other day because they listened to our Valaquenta episode from the Silmarillion stories, which you were on, Marilyn.
Yes.
And she talked about how she was I think this was a woman. I could be wrong, actually. They talked about how it was making them tear up because of the depictions of grief within the text. And so I think if you're going to nail a concept in Tolkien, grief is the one to do first.
And wow, do they do it in this episode.
Right. I'm fired up tonight, guys.
Cool.
Woo-hoo!
You know? I'm ready to go. All right.
Last note on this scene, the Palantir, the corruption. We're seeing Pharazôn, right? He comes in and he's looking all, I got to get my Palantir fix.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. And of course, we don't get to see what he's seeing.
Right. Not yet.
Not yet.
So
but watch this space.
And what's that going to do to, like for me I'm not sure all the lore stuff, like, I don't know if that's.
We're completely out of
We're completely off book, right? Yeah. So, but we know that the Palantir is a potent object, and this guy is a potent leader, and it's going to affect him. I think I would say.
I actually have one more thing on the scene now, which is any man who must say "I am the king" is no king. And
good point.
When I don't remember if Eärien or Kemen said he's not the captain anymore. I think it was Kemen.
Yeah, it was Kemen.
And Elendil goes, he's right. And he kind of shrugs it off and he starts walking away. And that's when all his men go, thank you, Captain, my captain, you know? And I'm just like, this is a leader. This is a leader of men, literally.
Yeah.
They, and they're the race of men.
We're tears.
But I think that's such a beautiful moment, and it really made me think back to the Tywin thing of like power is something that you have to inhabit in a way that you don't need to assert.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is why he and Muriel are so drawn to one another, because they both use this same style of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, you don't slap the queen without serious consequences unless that queen happens to be Muriel.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So Celebrimbor's deceit is the next one. Gil-galad reads Celebrimbor's letter that the forge is shut down. His captains push him to send troops to Mordor. He sees visions of a Dark Lord Sauron, but his commander urges him not to risk their kingdom over a ring's visions.
So
Shades of Elrond.
What's that?
Shades of Elrond.
So Gil's letters are not getting in.
It sounds too mundane to call him Gil.
Yeah, exactly. Gil-galad's letters are not getting in, but Celebrimbor's are getting out. That's interesting.
Well, it serves the purposes of a certain Annatar.
Exactly. And I think that's it's another nice thing that's, in the show that, we get to draw the conclusion like, well, wait a minute, messages are going one way, but not the other way. What's that about? And so I think that's smart construction on the showrunner's part.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not a lot to say about the scene, but it's mostly a setup for the later scene with Elrond.
Sure. Well, and this is the one episode where we get a vision, but we don't get a lot of we don't get any payoff from that vision.
Yeah.
And so there was a couple of things about the vision that I thought were really interesting. One was the way that the rocks were shaking and breaking away. It was filmed in a style and in a visual tone that we have not seen in this show. It was really interesting and it really caught my eye. And I don't know what it means. And then there's the fish. Like, what's up with the fish? It was like a whole bunch of, fish on the sea, on the, sea, lake, I don't know what, but like, gasping for air. And then there was like this weird orc vision of it's eating something. This was the most visually, like, I don't understand anything that's going on in this vision, where all the other visions that we've had have been pretty straightforward and they've paid them off almost immediately. So this one is like, whoa, big question marks. So I'm really interested to see how this is going to play out.
Yeah, well, I have some guesses, but that would be spoilery, so I think we'll just have to leave it ambiguous, unless, John, you have anything to say.
No, I thought he was going to play his little sound clip.
Oh, would you
All
like
right,
me
then
to?
keep your secrets.
All right, let's go to a quick break. When we get back, we will talk more Tolkien. And we're back. Next up, the ring's influence. Disa and Durin the Younger worry about Durin the Elder's influence under the ring. Disa tries to buy a tuning crystal and learns about the king's new ring tribute, which is a 100% tax on every coin spent. Disa drops the crystal and chases it into a cavern where she sings to find the orb. She hears the Balrog's growls and drops the crystal, breaking it.
Was that the Balrog or was that the Watcher in the Water?
Oh, was it the Watcher in the Water?
I think it was the Watcher in the Water.
Right, I'm going to change it.
We get lots of splashy tentacle things waving around, which is
I'm gonna
not
say
a Balrog style to my mind.
Growl. She hears a growl and sees tentacles.
There were no tentacles.
All right, I'm just going to say she hears a growl. How about that? Is everyone happy with that?
Well, the water splashed.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Tentacles or no tentacles, the water was splashing.
So I went back and forth myself. At first, I did think it was the Watcher in the Water. And then I, on my second watch and notes and the rest of the episode, I felt more like it's the Balrog. So
we shall see.
We shall see. This is the one scene that stretched my my sense of credibility just a little bit, because what is this chamber that a rock singer who's lived here her whole life, that's right off the Central Market, she's never known about this place? That was the only thing that I was a little bit dubious about. The mechanic, fine, I get it. It's all good. We need to, she needs to, encounter, what there is to be encountered here. And we need that setup. It's all fine. But it was just like the way they did it, I was like, not so great.
We could make the argument that this new chasm opened up as a result of the earthquake.
Yeah, but that chasm did not look new. That looked like it had, because the way the water was sitting there and formed and stuff. Yeah, it did not. But anyway.
I hear you. I mean, yeah, they've added the concept of stone singing, so I don't think Tolkien really had to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the dwarves, we see in the Third Age, we see in the Lord of the Rings. I think we've safely said we're going to talk spoilers for the Lord of the Rings itself.
Yeah.
The dwarves were at some point surprised by the presence of a Balrog. So yes. I guess there have to be unknown caverns.
John, did you have Mines of Mandalore, Mythosaur?
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. I didn't think about that, but yeah, you're
never
absolutely
occurred
right.
to me, but of course,
I'm so deep into this Tolkien lore right now that like my other polls are not happening.
And there's another really important Tolkien point here. I think this is in the same section where Disa says, learning to hear the mountain is a gift from Aule refined over a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And now the king is simply using a manufactured ring.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a perfect example of Tolkien's mortality in the machine thing. The machine is something that you make in order to overlay and dominate a natural process to make it faster, better, harder, whatever. And so rather than take the lifetime to refine your skills to sing to the mountain, you've got this glittery ring that is definitely a machine and manufactured.
Mm-hmm.
Making it faster, making it easier.
Right.
And something else that he alludes to when he gives his pep talk to the masses, which I think is coming up. I'll save that. For the moment.
I don't wholly agree with Tolkien on that, because I think Tolkien kind of draws an arbitrary line in the sand and says this level of technology is okay. And I don't agree with him on that. Should we eliminate agriculture? That's technology. Should we eliminate forks and knives? That's technology. I do think that we get a little caught up in like, well, this is new, so it's scary. And so but I see the point he's going for with rings. I think the idea of things to assert power over other things being bad, I like that.
Well, and also the idea of hastening processes, making them faster. I mean, obviously the automobile is the case in point. Shortcutting. That's
a bike is technology that makes you faster than walking. Should that be gotten rid of?
Sure. No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And, everybody can parse it however they want to. But when you get to decide if something is quote unquote unnatural.
Exactly. I do think many of the things we do are completely quote unnatural. If you want to look at it from a a purist standpoint.
Sure.
Cows are unnatural, right? They are unnatural. We domesticated those from wild animals.
Having a 3-person conversation over a tri-state area, and then
Tolkien would have hated this.
Conversation out around the world.
Around the world, yeah. But it's the subtext of domination in any kind of machine.
Are we not dominating cows by making them dependent upon us for their nourishment and making it so that they can't survive in the wild like their wild ancestors?
Oh, here we go.
No, we are if they're not free-range cows.
Well, let's not veer too far.
I'm just saying, I think Tolkien, I got a bone to pick with him on this one.
Sure,
I got a bone to pick with him.
Agreed.
I think he's drawing arbitrary lines. And he's kind of being an old man shaking his hand saying, when I was a kid, this is the level of technology we had. And that was the perfect amount of technology.
Well, and then we talked the other day, too, about him being upset about the pace of change and cars and bicycles and whatnot. So,
yeah.
Anyway, it's all mineshaft robbery. That was
I forgot about that line. Yeah, that was a good line. A good line. I also like that she basically bullies him into like, I'm gonna buy it for this price, so get over it.
Right.
1-to-1 ring tribute. Damn, Durin the Third.
Yeah.
That is some serious taxation.
Yeah. It took me a minute for that to set in as 100% tax rate.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. Did the Palantiri looked a little bit too much, or sorry, the Palantiri, the tuning crystal looked a little too Palantiri for me. I don't know if that's
yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
Interesting.
No.
Especially because they are trying to introduce that lore in this with the Palantiri, and I think they should have made that a little, like, make it angular or something. You know, I think that would have been a cool way to do like a tuning
cube
crystal.
or a triangle or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's a differentiation of power over and power with.
Okay.
Because up to this point, you could say Disa has had power with the Mount. The Stone Singers have had power with the Mount. But in his speech, King Durin says we now have power over Earth, Rock, and the destinies of other dwarf realms.
Yes.
And Khazad-dûm shall never want again. You know, and we can, you know, some people are tied into the cycles of the sun. Well, we can bring in the light whenever we want. Well, that's a clear dominating of a natural process, which we do all the time because we have lamps. I'll say it before John does, because it's absolutely true.
Hey, Tolkien, did you eat meat?
But if you listen to that clip again, listen to the music. Listen to the treatment that Bear gives to the Khazad-dûm theme. It'll give you the shivers.
Okay.
It's really, really amazing.
I think that's another really good point, is the power of or power over, and with the dwarves we're seeing it, or it's right there.
You can't forget that. You have to keep that in mind. And we even have the king with a Bilbo moment. You know, where's the ring?
Right. Yeah. Where's the ring? Is it? Yeah.
I thought that was too much. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Well, yeah, I was really thinking, what's the function of this?
We're jumping a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
So
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, it's a natural extension of our conversation.
Yeah, why don't we move on to that scene? That way we can keep talking. So I call it the Council of Durin instead of Elrond. That's my little haha moment. Durin the Elder calls together representatives of the other 6 dwarven lords to offer them rings of power for a price. Durin tells Narvi to lift all restrictions on digging to get more gold. He begins to panic when he can't find his ring, but it's on the table near him, whispering temptations. Durin the Younger arrives to warn his father of what Disa saw and asks him to stop digging, but his father reminds Narvi of his orders. The king says he can now see the mountain, unlike the Stone Singers who can only hear the mountain. He insists there is no danger.
Again, another densely packed scene. A lot of little stuff that could just go whoop right by. But when we start to unpack it, there is a ton going on here.
Why are we valuing sight more than listening, David?
This goes to the conversation we were just having, weren't we, about shortcutting processes or
yes,
and then I think it also goes into the conversation of power over versus power, of or with. Yeah. And so the Stone Singers are not efficient in a market capitalist kind of way, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can see, and okay, we have some regulations and we got to be careful and, whatever. And what is Durin the Third say is but a thimble of ocean of riches that we've taken out.
Right.
And so, and he can see every jewel and every vein of gold and everything, so that they can really be efficient in their extraction.
And I'm thinking of what Prince Durin was saying to Celebrimbor when he's describing the change in his father.
Mm-hmm.
He never used to be greedy.
Mm.
And that is very consonant with the lore, that the one effect that everyone seems to agree that the Dwarven rings had on the Dwarf Lords was it inflamed a desire for gold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they were said to be the and this is a legend, so I think we could say it's said in the Lord of the Rings, they were said to each be the foundation of a great dwarven treasure hoard.
Right. But you need gold to make gold, was Thorin's other comment about, or I guess it was Thorin's father who said, the ring needs gold to make gold. So, but I don't know that they're necessarily following that in this particular adaptation.
There was some other good writing in this at the beginning of the council scene here, and he's using this analogy of the land as a body, and limbs are stretching and bones are creaking, and I'm blanking the name of the actor again. I have it up in the notes before, but Peter Mullen. He is just killing it in this role right now. He's really hitting his apex, I think.
Yeah, we're definitely getting a feeling, or I'm definitely getting a feeling of the Lear effect, King Lear.
Yeah.
And interestingly, you're saying that, David, just reminded me of in Muriel's dream way back in season 1, when she's doing the blessing of the children and suddenly there's a rumble and she says, our island sometimes needs to stretch.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
I wonder if they made that connection.
Yeah, that body. Yeah, that's cool.
So can we go on to technical issues? This is my next section. Celebrimbor goes to his forge where Merdania has gone missing while resizing a ring. Objects move as if by an invisible hand, including the anvil falling from the ceiling.
What did I say?
Yeah.
You did. You called that.
Celebrimbor removes the ring from Merdania's hand, and she said she was in a shrouded and dark version of the same place where she saw a tall figure with skin made of flames and pitiless eyes. She thinks it has been there with them. Celebrimbor learns that Sauron added more mithril, but refuses to provide advice on how to fix the problem. Celebrimbor is called away to speak to Durin the Third, who tells him, Durin the Fourth, who tells him the ring has caused his father to be corrupted with greed. Durin casts suspicion on Annatar.
Mm-hmm.
So before we start taking this scene apart, there was something I just wanted to point out at the very beginning. Celebrimbor has a paperweight, and he's got some cool looking papers on his desk.
Yes.
But the paperweight is a little anvil.
Exactly. So I noticed cute. That second watch. It was really something. Yes, I
great merch. Sell Amazon, right?
Yeah,
and you've got a distribution channel. You could sell that stuff real quick.
Surprised you didn't have the Office World's Best Boss mug.
Just don't store it in the ceiling, okay?
Yeah,
please?
Right?
Yeah, I mean, whose design was that? I mean, OSHA was not consulted on this set design.
No, and who checks the lines regularly to see that they don't get frayed when they're raising and lowering?
Right.
So I didn't understand some of this scene. So at the end, he catches the hammer and figures out, the person, and she pulls the ring off. Again, very Jacksonian and, in visually in some regards of the ring and the finger and that kind of stuff. But I didn't understand why stuff was flying around all crazy, because she wasn't doing that. Like the first hammer that came off the table, it was almost like magnetism was pulling it off. And so I didn't really understand what the effect, what was going on here. Because that wasn't her doing a lot of the making the forge explode. You know what I mean? And I don't know, maybe it's just because the unseen world was being mucked with. I don't know.
I think you're onto something, David. I think perhaps Sauron was manipulating things, maybe in the hopes that she might get struck out with it, or he could blame some accident on her.
Okay.
Continue to isolate Celebrimbor. That's Celebrimbor's most trusted assistant, right?
Right.
Yeah, and yet I see her turning more and more to Annatar. Even before Celebrimbor goes off on his bad cop rant and Annatar steps in with the good cop rant. I pictured it as being an imbalance between the seen and unseen worlds.
Okay. All right.
And my interpretation, of course, is that the figure with skin of flame, etc., is in fact Annatar.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking Balrog by this on my second watch and reconsideration of what he was saying. My initial thought was Annatar, and then Annatar. But then I was like, that sounds a little Balrog-y because flame eyes, very ancient. So I got a little little confused in this scene.
Well, Sauron is a fire spirit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, seeing things in their true nature, the pitiless eyes really scream Sauron to me.
Yeah. See, that's what I thought initially too. Yeah. So,
And also, when she says it's been here with us the whole time, I think the Balrog is too far away for that, right? This is somebody who's been here intimately. And that's why Annatar had to. They're right next to each other, but if he's deep in the mountain, is she going to be like, it's been here with us the whole time? You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay.
I don't feel like my neighbors, even next door, are with me right now. Do you?
The Balrog is in Khazad-dûm, which is miles and miles away from Eregion, which is where the Gwaithimírdain are.
Okay.
So
even though they're next door in the grand scheme.
Right, relatively close, but not on top of each other.
Only in the minds of the showrunners here, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, still, a masterful ability for Annatar to get Celebrimbor back involved here.
Yes.
Right? Perfect play.
Also, I love that Annatar is basically like a kid cheating on his homework, right? A plus A times B equals, well, no, you're doing it wrong. You have to do it like, wait a minute.
Yep.
And then this master gaslighting and using Galadriel, who I really thought that it was interesting that he compared her to Galadriel, because that says something about Galadriel as being someone that a normal, a mundane elf, can I say that?
Sure.
Like a regular elf would look up to Galadriel. Like she's even more elfy elf than most elves are. Right?
Absolutely.
And so it's like, hey, David, you're really like, this hero or this, amazing person. Like, thank you. That's very kind of you.
And then for Annatar to tell the Gwaithimírdain that Celebrimbor has been damaged by forging the Blade of the Seven. That was just evil. Absolutely wicked.
And he's isolating her, right?
Yeah.
I think he's isolating Celebrimbor even more.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
And suddenly making the Gwaithimírdain the us with Annatar versus him, Celebrimbor. And I think Edwards is also starting to show more than a touch of the King Lear about him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really starting to affect him visibly. I mean, his hands were shaking.
Right.
And he knows what he's dealing with. Is incredibly dangerous, and he managed to do it more or less successfully with the Elven Rings so far that we can see. But I'm thinking back again to that scene where the dwarves bring their piece of mithril, and Celebrimbor picks it up and is about to dump it in when Annatar reaches out his hand. And does either the palm thing and puts in something completely different, or simply makes it look very formalized and closes his eyes and holds it in his fist.
That's I'm with you.
Shoves the juju in. I mean, either way, he clearly has affected it.
Yeah.
My favorite part of this whole scene is just how masterfully he nudges Myrddania to the conclusions that he wants her to go to, right? He never says Celebrimbor is the Ring of Fire. He says something that I think is a true statement, which is, I didn't want any of you to see that. Right? I didn't want you to see my true form.
No, definitely not.
And just leads her to the conclusion that it's Celebrimbor and not him, right?
Yep.
She's the one who makes that logical leap.
Yes.
So it is not the Balrog.
No, I don't really think it is.
Yeah.
Oh.
It makes so much more sense if it's,
it's tastier that way.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm digging that. Cool.
I feel like I need to take a bath. Talk about slime.
Right.
My goodness, metaphorical or literal. Sauron is slime.
Well, I think your big scene is up next.
All
right. The Unseen World. Oh, I didn't actually say the scene that we were talking about as we were talking about the second part of it, which is Sauron consoles Myrddania, telling her the Unseen World shows things as they really are. He leads her to the conclusion that Celebrimbor was the fiery figure and swears her to secrecy while he helps to heal the Elven Lord. He tells her she looks like Galadriel when the light hits her hair.
Right. There's the scene description. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Because, of course, secrecy is always good for community building, right?
Well, but he does it in a way that says, like, let me help him. You know, he's not ready to hear that he's fallen to darkness.
I know, but it's
beautifully done. Beautifully done. Dennis system, pull it back up.
Take another look.
Dennising all over the place.
100%.
Seriously.
All right, so the Númenorian funeral is what we're doing next. The Númenorians place candlelit shells in the water in memory of their lost loved ones, including Elendil and Valandil for Isildur. Yes, that was correct. I was reading it correctly and I typed it correctly, I promise. Kemen arrives to condemn the shrine to make way for the new aqueduct. He taunts Elendil, but Elendil tries to escort a priest out in peace with his relic, which Kemen breaks out of spite. Elendil punches Kemen to the ground and is captured by guards, but Valandil stops Kemen from attacking, telling him Kingsmen aren't welcome at this shrine for the faithful. Kemen and Valandil fight, and Valandil holds Kemen at sword point. Elendil orders Valandil to put the sword down, only for Kemen to stab Valandil in the back, killing him. Kemen frames Elendil.
All right, Marilyn, where are we going to start with this?
It's an incredibly beautiful ritual in the oldest shrine in the old quarter of Númenor.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the shrine of Nienna.
Is that the figure that was broken?
Unquestionably,
okay.
Because she is the one who...
Kemen's even more a POS now that I know that it's her and not just some random
it's not some
artifact.
Random... No, this is the shrine to Nienna. This is a ceremony to help the dead Númenorians find peace, which I found interesting because my philosophy is, the dead have already found their peace. It's the living who need to find their peace about those who have died. But, it works both ways. Now, interestingly, in a sense, beautiful as this is, it still represents something of a fall for the Númenorians because only the monarchs were supposed to take on priestly roles in the beginning. And they were only enacted on the top of Meneltarma, the open air sanctuary with no buildings or no other devices.
Right.
Here we have a beautiful sanctuary with a priest running the service, doing sacred ceremonies. But it's wonderful.
Right.
It's wonderful. And I knew the moment that I saw that statue of Nienna that it was going to be smashed, and probably by Kemen. And all this for an aqueduct. Right. Right. Of course.
We've got to make way for the hyperspace bypass.
It reminds me, by the way, Marilyn, you say this is a fall for the Númenorians because they only should have basically one temple, right? One shrine.
Right.
And it reminds me of the schism currently within Jewish belief.
Interesting.
Which is you may have noticed that some Jews call their place of worship a synagogue and some call it a temple. Some call it a shul as well.
Yes.
And temple.
Interesting. It's in my where I interact. It's interchangeable, the word.
So temple is the most controversial of them because the more strict denominations of Judaism will tell you that there is one temple and it is in Jerusalem, and we cannot call any other place of worship the temple or a temple. And so I think of it like that. It's again really interesting. I love that listener pointed out the ties with Jewish tradition.
Yes, and they just keep on popping up because we are talking about a concept of a quote unquote true faith,
right?
And the reason why I think they were led to this particular outcome is because this implies that, yes, this has been going on a very long time because this is the oldest shrine and the oldest part of Númenor. Mm-hmm. Those who remained faithful to the old ways had to have some form of enacting them.
It's the democratization of it, right?
And if that means that you're slipping into ceremony, well, ceremony is just something that people do. Whether it's with an official or just on their own, ritual is as much a part of us as our meaning making.
If only there was a podcast that talked about rituals.
Yeah, I was going to say people like rings, they like rituals.
If it were bundled with some other podcasts as a package.
Yeah. With a lovely tent sheltering us all together. So yeah, we have that incredible stained glass window, which I interpreted as being of the tree.
It's a definite tree design motif, and there's 11 small circles that are branching out from the tree. So on the outer ring of the circle, and I don't know if there was significance there or not, but I counted 11 little nodules.
I think that could indicate the number of the Valor.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that. That might be incorrect. But I just went with, the original tree that Morgoth killed off, or the white tree of Númenor, or, as John says, follow the trees. There's all kinds of possible meanings for that.
More merch that Amazon could be selling.
But then the shell motif.
Yes, right.
In
with the
the walls,
sconces.
Being the Númenorian flavor to this essential shrine of grieving and mourning. And the tradition of releasing lighted candles to float on the water to honor your beloved dead ones, that's thousands of years old. We see it in the Buddhist Bon Festival in Japan and in Hawaii. In ceremonies, we see it in Hindu rituals on the Ganges River. There are many East Asian and Southern Asian cultures that use this particular form of memorializing. Sometimes it's paper boxes that float with the candle inside. Sometimes it's just, as we saw here, a simple shell with the wax candle in it, floating out on the water. Even today in Providence, Rhode Island, they have, in the summertime, they have this water fire where in evenings they have these large metal baskets full of wood. And after dark, people will go about in boats and light these baskets with holding these wonderful flames all down the river, and also in the circular basin, which is the headwater of the river. It's a tidal river, so that combination of fire and water seems to be really, really embedded in the human spirit.
And this whole scene ends with the lights on the water drifting out into the
Yes, and Valandil's death. Truly heartbreaking in this moment. And Kemen washing his sword in the water is just abominable.
That was like a big note I had here. Kemen, he doesn't just, for him, what he's doing is I gotta get the blood off my sword and whatever. But visually, the way that they filmed that scene, it is ritualistic.
Oh, yeah.
In its depiction. And it was so powerful.
The deliberate desecration of this oldest shrine of what have now become the faithful. And of course, foreshadowing, which I won't spoil. You can cue Frodo again if you watch on to keep your secrets. Yeah, this was just an incredible scene.
I've got a ton of notes. I've got a couple of technical or lore questions that I wanted to ask. There was a word that was uttered, Narcea.
Yeah, that was a new word to me. And of course, with the screeners, we don't have.
Yeah, we'll have to check it after
after it comes out.
And then what language was the old man speaking when he was saying, we've got to preserve that relic so the dead can be taken care of?
I didn't pay close attention to it. At a guess, it would be... It's more likely to be Quenya than Sindarin, I think.
I think it's Quenya because that's what
I think it has to be
Elendil was speaking to Galadriel in season 1.
Right. I think that's the most likely. I mean, there's a possibility that it could be Adonaic, but I think
also their titles were recorded in Quenya for the faithful, right? Their titles were recorded in Quenya, and then it's only the Kingsmen. Well, they're not really Kingsmen till later, but those breaking from the faithful tradition that record their names in Adonaic in the roles of kings and queens.
Yeah.
Just to pivot back slightly to the aqueduct thing, something that it really reminded me of was sort of a Robert Moses thing where, industry has to pave its way here and we've got to do all this stuff. And so we're going to bulldoze communities and community spaces in for a greater good, quote unquote, greater good purpose. And I know, Moses was doing Robert Moses in New York City and the way highways were designed and brought in. And there's a lot of complexity to it. But then just to oversimplify it a little bit, just this idea that infrastructure is more important than community space.
Yeah.
Particularly if those communities are communities that are troublesome in some way.
Right, quote unquote, troublesome.
Quote unquote, perceived as troublesome by those who have the power to do aqueducts. Once again, what is it with the aqueducts, right? We had an aqueduct in Pelagia, and now it's another aqueduct.
You need a plot device, you get an aqueduct.
Seriously.
You got Kemen coming in and saying, Mr. Elendil, tear down this wall.
What did the Romans ever? What did the Númenorians ever give us?
we got to do a Monty Python.
I know.
Oh, you absolutely have to. Absolutely.
I think what would be really fun is if for like a Christmas special or something, we just all reenacted a full Monty Python movie and just each took several characters.
That would be fun.
Every affiliate contributes some lines.
That would be a lot of fun. But how are we going to, draw lots for Dennis? Because everybody's going to want to do Dennis.
Which is Dennis? I fart in your general direction?
No. Dennis is, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords.
Yeah.
There's no system for it.
Right.
You know what, Marilyn? You can have Dennis.
Oh, you're very kind.
Merry Christmas.
I'll happily take the French soldiers too, just because. But
so I have two last notes. One about the Swift Sunrise line, and then I have one about the fight between Valandil and Kemen. I don't know if we have a preference to talk about one or the other.
Go for it.
Well, let's talk about Kemen and Valandil. So this was a fight that was foreshadowed a couple of episodes ago.
Absolutely. Well, a couple of scenes ago.
Yeah. Well, it was in the bar.
Right. Yeah. But then we also have
this scene in this one
with the decapitating and so forth.
Right. And something that really struck me about Valandil, it reminded me a bunch about Pippin and Merry when they returned to the Shire. And that Kemen, when we met him in season 1 and with all his other shipmates, they're young, they're idealistic.
You mean Valandil?
Valandil, sorry, yeah. Apologies. Valandil was young and his whole cohort, they're young and idealistic and they're ready to ride off with their queen going to war. Probably not unlike a lot of Tolkien's contemporaries were when they were facing World War I.
Absolutely.
And then when Merry and Pippin come back to the Shire, they're badasses, right? They kick some serious ass. And they clean up the Shire, with all the remnants of the sort of the shattering of all the evil forces and all the other evil stuff that was going on. And this idea that people who have lived through combat and through great stress and turmoil, if you've survived and come out, reasonably whole, and alive, that you're different. And so his fight with Kemen is very. I mean, the whole head in the water bit, like that was all just for some dramatic tension. But Valandil had this, fight from the beginning. It was, he owned it. I just wanted him to do a flip and pull him into the water when that was happening. Like when he's got his head in the water, he could have just fallen into the water with both of them, and he would have won that fight because he's a sailor. So anyway, whatever. But I just really was appreciating the arc that Valandil went on, and what that represents is that somebody who's gone out and faced the terror of combat, who's coming back, and then you've got this bully like. I'm going to punch you in the nose, bully, right? You don't scare me because I've seen real combat.
Yeah, I would say that Kemen needs to learn self-defense, but he's already so twisted inside, I'm not sure that he can learn the things that he needs to learn even more before he can learn self-defense. You got to have 2 soldiers holding Elendil before you can punch him in the gut, and you have to, all the... Yeah. Anyway.
But of course, if Saruman can get stabbed in the back, then I think we're fine.
this is like a rule for life if you live in this kind of world, is never, ever turn your back on your opponent and never leave a weapon in reach of your opponent.
Right.
And now, of course, Elendil's got some serious guilt baggage to carry.
Oh, holy cow. I mean, I think, Elendil was more than halfway to being his surrogate son, and now he is gone.
Yeah. So the priest says, "A far greener country under a swift sunrise," and it's a line that we've talked about before.
Yes.
In the movie, it's an adaptation with Pippin and Gandalf, and in the book, it's a dream that Frodo has in the House of Bombadil, and there, Frodo heard a song that seemed to come like a pale light behind a gray rain curtain, and growing stronger to turn the veil all to glass and silver, until at last it was rolled back, and a far green country opened under. Pardon me, I flubbed the line here. And a far green country opened before him under a swift sunrise.
Look at you being all lore master.
Very nice.
Well, the internets provide they're a cornucopia of information. And I guess at that point in the book, he had no idea what that dream meant. But then at the end, when he's sailing, it's again revealed and brought back. So I thought it was really interesting. Now, I don't know. I was fine with the line under this circumstance, but again, I'm a more casual fan. But I just wonder how much this line is going to make maybe some book-oriented folks howl a little bit. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I think all the people who are complaining there's too much Peter Jackson in it will probably howl.
Okay, right, yeah.
I don't know that book people will howl particularly. Because they could have talked with their friends, the elves, when the elves were still friends, and the elves were describing this event, and so that's how it went into the lore and then the rituals of the faithful.
I find that it's a beautiful description, and I think was it episode 1 of season 1 when Galadriel is on the boat?
Right.
It felt that scene, the way they shot that scene, felt very inspired by this line. So
intentionally so. They tried to recreate it as much as they could.
Yeah.
I don't know, John, what do you think?
The line that similar to Frodo's line, or the line about
the presence
Frodo,
of the line there in the middle of
I didn't connect it at all when I was watching it.
Oh, okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah,
well, then.
I was not thinking about that at all. It is interesting though, now that you bring it up, that the Númenorians are explicitly banned from sailing west. Right? They are. Yeah. They know that they are banned from sailing west. They can never make that journey that Frodo made.
At least not in their bodies.
Sure. Right. And so that's an interesting line to put in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. And in a shrine of the faithful.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess they long for something that they know they cannot have.
A
common occurrence. Can we move on to the corruption of the rings?
Yes.
So that we get back to Celebrimbor time. Celebrimbor asks Sauron if he altered the dwarven rings. He says no, they both did. I love the long pause there.
Yeah.
Sauron claims the deception of Celebrimbor to Gil-galad brought deceit into the process, corrupting the rings. Annatar tells Celebrimbor their only options are to confess to the High King or to plunge on. Durin the Younger tries to get his father to take off the ring, but Durin the Elder tells him he's proud of his son for allying with the elves and saving their kingdom. He gives his son his regalia back. When Durin the Younger arrives home, Disa makes him swear to never wear any of the rings. His sweet talked him, right? It's like, I don't want any part of that until you give me my job back.
Well, that's the impression that's created, isn't it?
Yeah. And
I can see where Disa might be led to suspect that there was some, kind of bribery involved. Which, of course, was not the case. And Prince Durin is quite open about the fact that, I tried. I really tried. And and nothing I could do could persuade him.
Well, I don't think that this is bribery. I think this is just he craves the acceptance of his father.
Sure.
Which he's never had. And so the minute he gets it, he stops arguing with him at that very moment. Right.
Well,
and I can only go with what they're telling me on TV. We can't assume that he kept going after that. I think the regalia gets ripped away from him if he keeps going too hard.
My interpretation was he was so gobsmacked that it would have this outcome that he just didn't know what to say at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I still think that he was wishing desperately that he could get his father to give up the ring. He'd give the collar back again if his father would give up the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Was how I read it. But you may be right, Sean. I mean, I guess we can just wait and see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read it more too that he was conflicted.
Yeah.
He wants to be prince again, and he wants his dad back again.
That even more than being prince,
right?
I think.
And I think this is interesting, and for his arc, then over the course of the coming seasons, this is a really important time for Durin the Fourth to have lived without the trappings of royalty and the privileges that he's had to live. What did she say? Dear. There's a word for things that are expensive. They're dear.
Right.
They've had to live within their means a bit more. He's had to take a job, and he's been without power. And so when he does eventually assume the throne, assuming that that's what happens, that he will have had that experience and that will have tempered him. And there's this line, time and pressure can shape a dwarf as surely as it can shape a stone. I was like, oh, another fire line. Like, that was so good.
Yeah.
And he's being shaped by this experience, whether or not it's tainted by the ring and, all of that stuff. Just this time away from his father and away outside of the power structure is really going to affect him later on in his arc.
Yes, and learning more about the risks and the dangers of kingship.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because Durin the Third is cray-cray at this point.
I'm afraid so, and I think that's maybe the hardest thing of all for Prince Durin to accept.
I want to go back to Celebrimbor for a minute because I want to talk about the concept of reactive abuse.
Interesting. Okay.
Huh.
The concept that an abuser, to lessen their culpability and make you think that they didn't do as bad of a thing they did, will bait the victim into feeling like they're implicated in the abuse, right?
Yeah.
Baiting someone into hitting you back, something like that. This obviously is not physical abuse, but this is emotional manipulation. And he says, Sauron says to him, no, I didn't do anything to the rings. We did. He puts his hand in the pot.
Right.
And that's such a moment of, I think it's true to the concept of reactive abuse. I might be stretching the concept a little bit, but I think it's the same kind of thing, is trying to make it so that the victim feels like they did something wrong, so they feel too icky to get out of the situation.
And I'm right back with Galadriel on that raft where Sauron says to her, what are your elves going to say to you when they know that Sauron lives because of you? Same.
But she came clean, at least.
Exactly.
Eventually.
Exactly. And isn't it ironic that the Master of Lies is saying, you lied to your High King?
Right.
And then the line that just absolutely kills me, Annatar says, just be mindful, someone is not manipulating you.
I mean, that in his head, he's just having fun with that one, right? Like, that's just
excruciating, and it's so well done.
We got a little bit for the plot and then a little bit extra for fun.
Yeah. Good golly, Ms. Molly.
And this scene, the way I was when I was watching it, I was trying to understand. It felt at one point that Annatar he's like, I don't know how to handle this situation. Like, what's going on? And then we get this sort of shot from over Charlie Vickers' shoulder looking back, and his head is kind of down in kind of a thoughtful repose, and then the camera flips back around, and then we see him, and as his face lifts up from that thoughtful pose, he's very clear, and then that's when he gives him the only pathway out, which is, we can you can go and tell your king and confess, or we can dive deeper into the maelstrom. And so it feels like Annatar is in that moment coming up with this stuff. Like he's like playing jazz a little bit. He's like, oh, how am I going to deal with this one? And he's like, oh, I can do this. And we're seeing that actually develop real time. It's not like there's a pre-baked script that he has. He's having to deal with Celebrimbor, who's very enamored with him, but is also very smart and very observant. And so Annatar's constantly having to like dance and be prepared and think a few steps ahead. Never sure where things are going to go.
Yeah, there is a reason why Celebrimbor is the finest smith and crafter of his age. And the wisdom that comes along with that. And the fact that there is some piece that he knows that Sauron doesn't know and is continually trying to get. Which is interesting because I'm quite sure that, Annatar Sauron knows a lot more about the unseen world than Celebrimbor does.
Right.
So it's kind of fascinating.
So let's go on to the next part of the scene. Celebrimbor is in charge. Celebrimbor scolds his assistants for losing attention making the rings. He says the only path forward is to forge the 9 rings to redeem the 7 as a part of the project. He will create new designs, alloys, and processes, as he says. Sauron gives a pep talk, and the team gets ready to start immediately. Celebrimbor is stressed. And here I want to picture Celebrimbor doing a record scratch like, you're probably wondering how I got here.
Funny.
I'm now suddenly thinking of throwing good money after bad.
Why 20 rings? That seems an odd number and that's the total with the 1 ring, right? So it's 19 plus 1.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's any mystical things around 20. I don't know. Is that just the way the math ended up, or did he intend to get to 20, or?
Well, again, 1, 3, 7, and 9 are significant numbers.
Yeah, agreed.
In a lot of different cultures.
Agreed.
So that might have been at the back of
it. Just ended up as 20, right?
Oh, they've also played a lot of jazz hands on the order of the rings being forged.
Yes, they have. And the manner of it, and the fact that there were a whole bunch of rings just lying around, and in the lore, it was Sauron who picked them up and said, okay, I'm going to give this money to this group and this money to this group. They were not specifically forged with specific people in mind.
Okay.
Here's my philosophy in the lore, which is not the same thing as the show, which is, I think he started giving them to dwarves, and the dwarves were not very easily corrupted. And he's like, I'm going to pivot here. And then he gave more of them to men because men are easier to corrupt. In the books, Celebrimbor forges the 3 elven rings without Sauron after the other rings are forged.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So they have flipped it on its head.
Right.
And so we just don't know what they're doing in this.
Okay. Fair enough. I can deal. Organizational leadership. I was just thinking about this a little bit.
Project management. Can we talk about it?
Yeah. Project management. Scrum.
Should I make that the stinger? I think I said earlier, Lord of the Rings is fundamentally a story about project management. I think I'm going to make that the stinger.
I like it. I was just thinking about, in military, you would have an officer and a non-commissioned officer, so you might have a lieutenant and a sergeant, or in an orchestra, you might have a conductor, but then the first chair, is doing a lot of stuff. So you have somebody who's looking up and out and at the big picture, and then you have somebody who's looking in and down at everybody else. So while Celebrimbor is saying, right, we have this huge mission, this is our direction, and I expect everything from you, it's the NCO, it's the, it's the sergeant, or it's the, whatever, the manager under the director, what have you, who's, hey, it's cool, right? The boss is just thinking big thoughts, but we got to do our work. And so it was it was very relatable, the scene. So
Mm-hmm.
I hear you.
Yep.
I hear you. So he's going to work them night and day now.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to work out?
Not very well.
Probably
Even
not.
if you're serially longevial, I have to assume that a certain amount of rest is necessary.
Right. A new team up is up next.
Mm-hmm.
Elrond arrives in Lindon to plead for Gil-galad to send forces to Eregion. He refuses, saying he believes this is a construction of Sauron. Galadriel is released from captivity by the orcs. Adar offers an alliance against Sauron, who watches the Forge swirl metals together.
So we have a ticking clock now for the rest of the season, right? We have these orcs marshaling. And I thought, from my TV watching brain of this, was like, oh, well, this is kind of convenient. Annatar is going to commit his final crime, and then he's got the cleanup. He's got all these orcs to come in here to like wipe everything out and destroy all the evidence and destroy any other possibilities of forging or what have you. So whether it's Adar or Annatar, Sauron's things, that's what's going to happen. Is right. Eregion's going to get wiped out, and that's going to cause more chaos and uncertainty and doubt about what's really going on and what's happened with these rings.
All right, then, keep your secrets.
All right, that makes me feel all right. I picked up on something.
I was under the impression that one of the reasons why the High King refused to send people to Eregion is because the ships had already sailed down
to Mordor. Yeah.
Was that...
That's
Did I read that
wrong,
that's
or? No, you're correct.
Okay.
Because that one general was saying we gotta send her. Now is the time. Like commit.
The last time we saw the High King, that was what
exactly.
they were.
He didn't say I'm not going to do that. He said that won't be possible.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Fair point.
So, does that orc with the baby, the tall, thin orc, do they have a name? Because I think you might have to add them to the show guide now, John, because that's like multiple appearances.
I don't know.
He seems to be Adar's first in command, and he does have a name, but I don't think we'll be able to identify it until we're actually watching.
Yeah, let's see. You know what's something that I do like about, since Prime is being nice to us with screeners, I'll say something that I really like about the Prime video player. They're not our sponsor, but I do like they do the X-ray thing where you can click up on the remote and it'll tell you all the actors. That has helped me with the show guide.
Very easy to do that. Yeah.
Wait, is it do we have it in our player?
No, when I go to do the images for the screen, for the actual,
got it.
I'm just trying to envision how this is going to complicate Galadriel's relationship with her High King if she decides
I'm going to say this
to ally with Adar. Not to mention Elrond. I mean, talk about confirmation bias.
This is the sound of my hands rubbing together gleefully.
I have a theory now, and I haven't watched ahead, so it's really mine.
Oh, good for you.
I think that this is how they're going to explain her going to Lothlorien. I think she's going to get exiled from the kingdoms.
Okay.
Interesting.
From the kingdoms of the Noldor, and she's going to go out and forge a new path with the Sylvan Elves.
I like it.
Well, I guess the prior question is she going to accept his offer of allyship?
Yeah.
I think so.
It's exciting.
I'll be very interested to see.
That's what I'm saying. This episode, man, it was like it's like all these things are coming together.
Does she even know that Annatar is working with Celebrimbor at this point?
She strongly suspects it, right? She's the one who's been pushing, like, hey, he's going to manipulate Celebrimbor. He's focused. He needs rings. She said that. He needs rings, not armies.
Yeah, but they never had any actual confirmation that
the bridge is blown.
Halbrand showed up at Eregion.
Well, she's also been seeing visions of Celebrimbor.
Yeah, no, that's
having issues.
I'm pretty sure she, while not having actual, someone telling her this, she's convinced in her own mind.
Yeah.
CSI Middle Earth, starring Detective Galadriel.
Oh no, that's Law and Order. Whoopsies.
But it's also, I'm wondering how they're going to work it out that this clearly hostile orc army following the commands of Adar are actually going to serve the purposes of Sauron in the end. I mean, yes, to take down the Gwaithimyrdain, or will they?
You can keep finding orcs places.
But can you? Are there any orcs around other than Adar's children?
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah. And is Númenor going to be getting involved with this contretemps at all?
Again, right? Because they've already gone out once and they didn't have a good experience. So,
and they seem to have plenty on their plates right now without going back to Middle Earth just at the moment.
Beautiful final shot of or one of the final shots of the forge. And again, it goes back to that eye motif that we get constantly. So
another record scratch for Annatar. You're probably wondering how I got here.
Which also leads me to wonder how they're going to depict him making the One Ring.
Ooh.
Yes.
Well, I mean, how many times in the opening of Lord of the Rings are they like forged in the fires of Mount Doom?
Well, we know the location
there.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because the forge is going to be conceivably, from what they've given us in the show, right, is that Aragon's going to get messed up a little bit. So the forge is going to be destroyed. So.
But he might take the anvil back. You never know.
That's what I was thinking, though. That's what I was thinking is they've shown us that the anvil is not attached to the ground.
Yeah.
Right?
I like that.
And we have Feanor's hammer there.
Oh.
Just saying.
I think it would be awesome if they have him forge it with Feanor's hammer. That'd be really cool. Yeah.
Right. Very cool.
Now that's
and with the dagger, because the dagger is the material for the 3 elven rings.
Yeah, but they don't have that anymore. I mean,
no, but the elven, like I just using all of these parts and pieces from the first age, being broken up and mixed into the second age stuff. Yeah.
Well, I was picturing using the hammer as a tool, not as a
no. Like I'm just saying, all of these things filtering out into
coming in together.
Yeah.
So. Got it.
Well, I think we're at the end.
Only like 2.5 hours, this one, right?
I mean, it's a good episode.
All right. So
I think it's a good sign of how good an episode it is.
Definitely. Yeah. I liked the episode the more we talked about it.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens.
So we have, I actually did a schedule this week, so I can actually just read off of it, which is nice.
Yay.
Here's the other stuff we're doing. We know we have a lot of new subscribers. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, remember to check the show notes for the link tree if you're interested in the season pass. And remember, we have a Discord and channel set up for all the different episodes, so you can go there and get into and have conversations with everybody. There's good conversations happening. And LOTR@thelorehounds.com for feedback. I don't know we're not going to do a feedback episode next week.
Let's see the volume. See the volume.
All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I think there's already about half a dozen that didn't get in. So.
All right. Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
Okay.
I do want to also add, if you want to help us climb the rankings and find new listeners, you can leave us a 5-star nice review. Usually people only leave reviews when they're mad about something we said. So I'm going to tell people, please leave us nice reviews so that other people know that we say nice things too.
Yeah, we haven't been talking about that aspect of liking and reviewing, because
it makes a big difference on Apple.
You don't understand how big a difference it does. So
it really does.
If you can take a moment.
Yeah. So, here's our weekly schedule. On the Lorehounds main feed, we've got this. We already did a feedback episode for the first 4 episodes, and we've got the DCEU is dead. Long live the DCU and Elseworlds. Whatever that is. That's from Alicia. I guess it's a funeral for the DC cinematic universe, the DC extended universe. Is it expanded universe? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's dead. And by the way, you can find all this on our main feed. So if you're on the Tolkien feed, just follow the link tree in the show notes, and it's the first link in there. And the Agatha All Along Prep recap and Who's Who podcast is also coming out on the main feed. There's going to be full coverage of that on the main feed from Jean and Alicia. Alicia's going to be spearheading this season, I think. She's very into the witchy lore. She's very into the WandaVision lore. So, and Jean, of course, staple of the MC universe. And also on our Patreon Supercast subscriptions, these are our recurring subscriptions only. So you can change over to a recurring subscription if you're on a season pass right now. we have the Rings of Power Lorecast for Season 2, Episode 5. That one's also on the Season Pass, so I should have led with that one first. And that's going to be on Númenorian politics and history this week. And we've got Second Breakfast number 23 on bagels. So if you are a subscriber, please send in your bagel-y feedback.
That's becoming a very interesting discussion on the Discord.
Once you start talking about schmears, I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, not too much of the schmears just yet, but I'm sure it's waiting in the wings.
Okay. All right. Now I want to talk about our new affiliate. David, you do a good pitch for them. Why don't you talk about Nevermind the Music and what they've just put out?
We're pretty excited about this. This is Mark and Nicole. Mark is they're both professors. He's a music professor. She is a psychology professor. They're friends. They got together and do this podcast where we'll take a song and then they'll start to talk about it. Mark will talk about it from a music perspective, and then Nicole brings in all this other interesting stuff, and it is a fascinating conversation. They're fun, they're lighthearted, they have a good time, and it's just Lorehound kind of stuff. It's the kind of stuff that our community loves. It's like, oh, I never thought about this song in that way. I've never thought about, how Jungian psychology plays into, a pop song of different kinds. They have a huge, wide, eclectic range of music. They're going to be covering songs from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And we're just really excited that they're part of our network now. They're really fun to talk to. On our main feed, we have an interview where John, Alicia, and I have a nice sort of 20-minute, half-an-hour conversation with them about the podcast. And then their first 3 episodes are out now on their feed, which is called Nevermind the Music. Nevermind, one word, the music. Link in the show notes. Go to our webpage to find it, or just search in your podcast player for Nevermind the Music. I think you guys are going to love it because it's right up Lorehound's alley, but it's just about music.
And to pitch it to my other, it's funny. Mark called me a high millennial because I'm right smack in the middle of the millennial generation, like a high elf.
Like
right,
a high
exactly.
So
like a high king.
To speak to my other high millennials, That's What You Get by Paramore is the first song they cover. Mm-hmm. And that really sang to my soul. I think Mark knew he was playing his audience when he sent us that as a sample.
Right.
All right.
Cool.
And you can listen to the first 3 episodes on their feed right now. You can find that in the link tree as well. That's What You Get, The Sign, and The Crossroads. So a lot of, and if those aren't the full titles, for example, it's That's What You Get by Paramore and the Motivic Limbic System. Like these are really good crossovers with psychology. And I think that's really impressive.
The Sign by Ace of Base and Young's Collective Parallel Minor.
Mm-hmm.
And The Crossroads by Bone Thugs and Harmony and 4 Rhythms of Grief.
Oh my.
Someone call Nienna.
Seriously. Well, maybe she wrote the song. Who knows?
Yeah.
I can't wait for a Spandau ballet and Money Notes of Middle Class School Dance. I don't know what that means, but I'm ready for it. Oh my!
Oh, don't announce them too early. We gotta.
No. I just had to get that one. All
right. So, real quickly, let's do our thank yous. David, I still have the 80s dance music loaded up.
It works for me.
Let's hype this up again.
Throw anything at 80s at me. I'm good.
Here we go.
All right. I feel like I'm back at the club. Our Discord server boosters: Gnarls, Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Doof71, Captain Gingy 56, Athena Ajalea, Adrian, Tina, Lestu, Nancy M, and Ghost of Perdition have all pledged their Nitro bits to our server, and that boosts our server and it gives us more capability. So thank you for looking after your community and making a better space for everybody to interact with.
Woohoo!
to our Lore Masters, our top tier monthly and yearly subscribers, be they on Patreon or Supercast. We always like to give a shout out. Big thanks to Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Patina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa, Andra B, Kwang Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dally V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Lestu, Jeffrey B, Elisa U, Fassi U, Neil F, Ben B, and our newest lore master, Charlotte M. And always last but never least, Adrian. Thank you all so very much for making this all possible. We couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without all of our subscribers, and we couldn't do it without all of our listeners. So no matter where you are in that mix, thank you for sticking with us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.